Employee runs to the bathroom for fear of the roach and faints at the sight of the towel CEO. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The cockroach had the audacity to freeze mid-stride, as if challenging Araya Noel Bennett to make the first move. She didn't sign up for this. Not today. Not when her feet ached from 9 hours of standing at her second job. Not when Amina's parent-teacher conference loomed tomorrow morning. And certainly not when she was already running behind on cleaning the master suite of this ridiculously oversized house. The bathroom gleamed with old money and new fixtures, all marble countertops and gold-plated faucets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Steam still clung to the mirrors from someone's recent shower, turning the space into a humid reminder that she cleaned spaces she could never afford to live in. "Don't you dare," Araya whispered to the cockroach, her voice carrying that edge of someone who had fought too many battles to lose to an insect. Her box braids, pulled back in a neat bun, caught the light from the skylight above. In the mirror's foggy reflection, she could see herself. Spine straight, lips pressed into a determined line, nude lipstick slightly faded from too many cups of coffee. The cockroach twitched its antennae. Araya reached for her phone, already planning to text her supervisor about pest control, when the creature skittered forward. Her scream echoed off the marble walls as she stumbled backward, her feet sliding on the damp floor. The world tilted, gravity betrayed her, and the bathroom door burst open. Time slowed, as it tends to do in moments of perfect catastrophe. Through her falling descent, Araya registered several things in quick succession. A man stood in the doorway. He was wearing nothing but a towel. Water droplets traced paths down his chest, past a jagged scar that ran across his ribs. His green eyes widened with alarm. His beard was still dripping. He was reaching for her. She was still falling. The cockroach, that smug little architect of chaos, vanished under the clawfoot tub. Araya's head connected with something solid, and the world went dark. When consciousness crept back, she found herself cradled in strong arms, her cheek pressed against a damp chest. The scent of expensive soap filled her nostrils, along with something else. A hint of coffee, perhaps, or old books. "Can you hear me?" The voice above her was deep, worried and slightly hoarse, as if it didn't get much use. Araya's eyes fluttered open to meet concerned green ones. The man holding her had the kind of face that belonged in fancy magazines, all sharp angles and gentle worry, framed by dark wet hair that curled slightly at the temples. But it was his expression that caught her, lost somehow, like he wasn't sure if he was helping or making things worse. Recognition clicked. This must be the mysterious owner her agency had mentioned, the recluse, the one who'd inherited the mansion and barely left it. "I'm fine," she managed, trying to sit up. Her head spun in protest. There was a..." She couldn't bring herself to admit she'd been defeated by a cockroach. "I slipped. You hit your head." His voice carried the weight of someone who knew about injuries. "Don't move yet. I have to move. I'm working." Arisha attempted dignity, but dignity is hard to maintain when you're sprawled across a near stranger who's wearing only a towel. "This is completely unprofessional. I should..." "Stay still," he interrupted, and something in his tone made her pause. "Please. I know head injuries, just give it a minute." A strange silence fell between them. Water dripped somewhere in the vast bathroom. The cockroach, probably watching from its hidden sanctuary, had witnessed the most mortifying moment of Araya's professional life. "I'm Elio," he said finally, his voice softer now. "Elio Mercer. I should have introduced myself earlier, before all this." "Araya Bennett," she replied, because what else could she say? "Sorry I invaded your bathroom and made you catch me while practically naked wasn't exactly appropriate workplace conversation." "I know," he said, then seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, the agency told me about you coming to clean, not about..." He gestured vaguely at their current situation. A laugh bubbled up in Araya's throat, unexpected and slightly hysterical. "Not about me falling into your arms like some terrible romance novel?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "I was going to say not about your cockroach fighting skills, but yes, that too." And there it was, a moment of perfect, ridiculous understanding between two people who should never have met this way. Araya felt her carefully maintained walls crack, just slightly, as a genuine smile tugged at her lips. "If you tell anyone about this," she warned, finally managing to sit up on her own, "I'll deny everything." "Who would believe me?" Elio's voice carried a hint of warmth now. The reclusive hermit and the cleaning lady, meeting in a bathroom because of a cockroach, sounds far-fetched. Araya stood carefully, straightening her uniform with as much dignity as she could muster. Her head still throbbed, but something else ached too, something she couldn't quite name. "I should finish cleaning," she said, not meeting his eyes. "The bathroom can wait," Elio replied, standing as well, one hand keeping his towel secure. "Let me get you some ice for your head. And maybe some coffee?" She should say no. She had a schedule to keep, a sister to get home to, a life carefully balanced on the edge of survival. But Elio stood there, looking simultaneously concerned and uncertain, water still dripping from his beard, and Araya found herself nodding. "Coffee," she agreed. "But I'm making it. I've seen the state of your kitchen." His surprised laugh followed her out of the bathroom, and somewhere in the back of her mind, Araya wondered if this was how normal people fell in love, not with grand gestures or perfect moments, but with wet floors and cockroaches and coffee that hadn't been made yet. She pushed that thought away. She had a job to do, a sister to raise, and no time for falling of any kind. But as she walked down the hallway, hearing Elio's slightly uneven footsteps retreat to his room to dress, she couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the universe had a terrible sense of humor, and sometimes, just sometimes, that wasn't such a bad thing. And in that moment, though neither of them knew it yet, something shifted, like a key turning in a lock they didn't even know existed. The kitchen counter was spotless, but Araya wiped it again anyway. Her fingers traced circles on the granite surface as she tried to ignore the man sitting at the breakfast bar, watching her with those quiet green eyes. 3 days had passed since the bathroom incident, as she'd started calling it in her head. 3 days of carefully avoiding the master suite during her cleaning rounds, 3 days of feeling Elio's presence like a shadow at the corner of her vision. And now here she was, 20 minutes after her shift should have ended, making coffee for a man who probably had vintage wine worth more than her car. "You don't have to do this," Elio said, breaking the silence. He'd traded his usual flannel for a simple grey Henley that somehow made him look both more approachable and more devastating. "I can make my own coffee." "No offense," Araya replied, measuring beans with precision, "but the burnt smell from your last attempt is still haunting the kitchen." A small smile tugged at his beard. "That bad?" "I had to sage the coffee maker." Their laughter mingled in the evening air, and something in Araya's chest tightened. This was dangerous territory. Nice moments in nice kitchens with nice men didn't belong in her carefully structured world. Her phone buzzed. Amina's text lit up the screen. "Coming home late. Study group, don't worry, Memex, Rodriguez is supervising. Also, we're out of hot Cheetos, critical situation. Send help." Aria's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Study group ends at 7, not a minute later, and hot Cheetos aren't dinner." "Everything okay?" Elio asked, and she realized she'd been frowning at her phone. "Just sister stuff." She poured hot water over the grounds, watching the coffee bloom. "She's 15. Everything's either a crisis or a revolution." "Amina, right?" When she looked up, surprised, he added quickly, "You mentioned her that day before the—" He gestured vaguely at his head. "Before I gracefully face-planted in your bathroom." The coffee dripped steadily now, its aroma filling the space between them. "Yeah, that's Amina. She's been my responsibility since our parents—" Araya stopped, realizing she was sharing more than she intended, but Elio just nodded, understanding in his silence. He had that gift, of listening without demanding, of holding space without filling it. "Sugar?" she asked, changing the subject. "Just black." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the mug. Static electricity, she told herself. Nothing more. Elio took a sip and his eyes widened. "This is different when it's made right?" She allowed herself a small smile of triumph. "Coffee's sacred. It deserves respect." "Is that why you always smell like it?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. He'd noticed how she smelled. She'd noticed him noticing. "Second job," she said finally. "At Moonbeam Coffee downtown. Late shift. Sounds exhausting. Sounds like paying bills." The words came out sharper than intended, and she saw him flinch slightly. "Sorry, I didn't mean—" "No, I'm sorry." Elio set down his mug. "I shouldn't assume anything." Another silence fell, this one less comfortable. Outside the sun was setting, painting the kitchen in shades of amber and gold. Araya thought about Amina waiting at home, about bills due next week, about the letter from social services still hidden in her drawer. "I should go," she said, reaching for her bag. "Wait." Elio stood, his movement slightly stiff, that old injury showing itself. "I wanted to ask, the garden needs work. I mean, I need help with it." If you're interested. Extra hours. Different from... He gestured at the cleaning supplies. Just thought I'd offer. Pride warred with practicality in Araya's chest. I don't know anything about gardens. Neither do I. His smile was self-deprecating. But the roses are winning, and I'm tired of surrendering. Despite herself, Araya laughed. Are you asking me to fight your roses, Mr. Mercer? Elio, he corrected softly. And yes, I suppose I am, though after seeing you face down that cockroach, the roses don't stand a chance. She should say no, should keep the boundaries clear, should stop noticing how his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how his presence made the huge kitchen feel less empty. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Amina. BTW. Saw a help wanted sign at the library. You could quit the coffee shop just saying love you. Still need hot Cheetos. Aria looked at Elio, really looked at him, at the way he held himself carefully, like someone used to taking up less space than his frame suggested. At the hope badly hidden behind his casual offer. The roses, she said slowly. Do they come with health insurance? His startled laugh echoed through the kitchen. No, but they come with dental. They fight back. I'll think about it. She shouldered her bag, already knowing she'd say yes. But right now I need to go save my sister from a hot Cheetos emergency. Sounds serious. Apocalyptic, according to her texts. Araya moved toward the door, then paused. Your coffee's getting cold. Elio lifted the mug in a small salute. Worth it. As she walked to her car, the evening air cool on her skin, Araya tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. It was just coffee, just a job offer, just a moment in a kitchen with a man who looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. But later that night, after Amina was asleep, with hot Cheetos dust still on her fingers, Araya found herself thinking about roses and battles worth fighting, and the way some silences felt like conversations waiting to happen. Her phone lit up with one last text. The garden? Tomorrow at 2? E. She stared at the screen, at those simple words that felt like so much more. Finally she typed, Bring better coffee beans. These roses deserve respect. His response came quickly. Yes, ma'am. And in the quiet of her small apartment, surrounded by bills and worry and the soft sound of Amina's breathing from the next room, Araya smiled. Maybe, just maybe, some battles were worth losing. The roses wouldn't know what hit them. Amina Bennett knew 3 things with absolute certainty. First, her sister was the strongest person in the world, even if she worked too hard and forgot to eat lunch sometimes. Second, the social worker who'd visited last week, with her pressed pantsuit and clipboard full of checkboxes, didn't understand anything about what family really meant. And third, watching her sister argue with the fancy white man about proper rose pruning techniques was the best entertainment she'd had all month. You can't just attack them with shears, Aria was saying, her hands on her hips, dark eyes blazing with the kind of determination usually reserved for late bill payments and parent-teacher conferences. There's a method. They're plants, Elio replied, looking both amused and bewildered. His usual disheveled appearance was enhanced by dirt smudges and a small leaf caught in his beard. Aggressive plants that are trying to kill me. They're living things, Araya corrected, reaching for the tablet propped on a garden chair. And according to this video, you're watching tutorials. Some of us like to be prepared. Amina, perched on the back porch steps with her chemistry homework spread around her, tried to hide her grin. She'd never seen her sister like this. Relaxed enough to argue about something as simple as flowers. Comfortable enough to let her guard down, even just a little. I think it's sweet, she called out, just to watch them both jump and remember she existed, like gardening couples on YouTube, except with more sexual tension. Amina! Araya's scandalized tone was worth it, especially when Elio nearly dropped his shears. Homework. Now. I'm multitasking, Amina replied, adjusting her glasses. The colorful beads in her braids clicked softly as she tilted her head. Chemistry and social observation. It's very scientific. Elio's laugh was unexpected, deep and genuine. She's got you there. Araya muttered something that sounded suspiciously like traitors, both of you, before turning back to the rose bush. But Amina caught the smile she was trying to hide, the way her shoulders had loosened over the past hour of garden work. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, making the overgrown garden look more enchanted than neglected. Amina had to admit, for a rich person's house, this place had character. Not like those sterile mansions in movies. This one felt lived in, even if most of the rooms were still covered in sheets. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Denise. Your sister still fighting plants with the hot hermit? Amina typed back, They're gardening. It's very romantic in a dirty way. Girl, everything about that sentence is wrong. You're just jealous of my front row seat to this slow burn romance. A yelp of surprise drew her attention back to the garden. Elio had apparently lost another battle with the roses, judging by the fresh scratch on his forearm. Without hesitation, Aria grabbed his wrist, examining the cut with the same focus she used for everything important. Inside, she commanded. That needs cleaning. It's just a scratch. Inside. Now. There was no arguing with that tone. Amina had tried many times. Amina, pack up your homework. Kitchen table's better for chemistry anyway. 10 minutes later, they were all in the massive kitchen. Amina spread her books across one end of the island, while Araya cleaned Elio's cut with supplies from a first aid kit that had appeared from somewhere. The domesticity of it all made Amina's heart ache a little. You don't have to, Elio started. Hush! Araya's touch was gentle despite her firm tone. What kind of example would I be setting if I let you get an infection from a rose bush? A realistic one? Amina suggested, earning a look from her sister. Less commentary, more balancing equations. But Amina wasn't really focusing on chemistry anymore. She was watching the way Elio looked at her sister, like Araya was a puzzle he couldn't solve but couldn't stop trying to understand. The way Araya's hands lingered a moment too long on his arm. The careful dance of two people trying very hard not to admit something was happening. You're good at this, Elio said softly, as Araya finished bandaging his arm. Practice. This one, she nodded toward Amina, used to climb everything in sight. Trees, fences, kitchen counters. That was strategic, Amina defended. The cookies were on the top shelf. The cookies were hidden for a reason. Your reasoning was flawed. Elio glanced between them, something wistful crossing his face. You two are close. We're all we've got, Araya said simply, but Amina heard the edge in her voice, the echo of that social worker's visit, of words like stable home environment and proper guardian evaluation. The kitchen fell quiet except for the scratch of Amina's pencil and the hum of the fancy refrigerator. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the windows in shades of pink and gold. It should have been awkward, this impromptu gathering in a kitchen too big for 3 people. Instead, it felt right. Then Elio cleared his throat. I made dinner, or tried to. If you both want to stay. Amina held her breath, watching her sister's face. Araya hesitated, her walls visibly going up. We shouldn't. Please. The words seemed to surprise Elio as much as them. I mean, it's the least I can do. After the rose attack, and you can tell me if it's actually edible. He stress-cooked all afternoon, Amina stage whispered. I heard the pans clanking while I was doing trigonometry. Araya shot her a look, but there was a smile tugging at her lips. You were eavesdropping? Observing, for science. Your dedication to education is suspicious. But Amina could see her sister wavering, could see the moment when the carefully constructed walls cracked just enough. Maybe it was the way Elio was trying not to look hopeful. Maybe it was the warm kitchen and the fading light and the band-aid on his arm. Or maybe it was something else, something growing as surely as those stubborn roses outside. Fine, Araya said finally, but I'm helping with the dishes after. Deal. Elio's smile could have lit up the whole kitchen. As he moved to the stove, Amina caught her sister's eye and mouthed, romantic. Araya mouthed back, chemistry homework. But later, when Elio wasn't looking, Amina saw her sister run a gentle finger over the band-aid on his arm, like she was checking a growing thing to make sure it was thriving. And maybe, Amina thought, watching them move around each other in the kitchen's golden light, some things didn't need pruning to grow exactly as they should. The letter sat on Araya's kitchen table like a ticking bomb. Dear Ms. Bennett, following our recent home evaluation, we have identified several areas of concern regarding the custodial arrangement for minor Amina Bennett. Araya had read it so many times the words had started to blur. Each paragraph was a fresh cut. Clinical language masking what felt like a personal attack. Inadequate bedroom space. Irregular guardian work hours. Lack of consistent male presence. Positive role model. Follow-up evaluation scheduled. The ancient kitchen clock ticked away precious minutes as she stared at the paper, her coffee going cold beside her. Outside, dawn was just breaking over their small apartment complex, painting the cramped kitchen in shades of grey and purple. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. Roses miss you. They're plotting revenge. Despite everything, her lips curved. Over the past 2 weeks, Elio's texts had become a strange constant in her life. awkward, earnest messages about garden disasters and coffee experiments. "Roses or you?" she typed back, before she could think better of it. His response came quickly. "Both. But the roses are more honest about it." Araya stared at the message, something warm and dangerous unfurling in her chest. This wasn't part of the plan. None of this was part of the plan. The sound of Amina's alarm drifted through their thin walls, followed by the usual morning shuffle of teenage feet. Araya quickly folded the letter and tucked it into her work bag, next to the growing stack of job applications and budget calculations. "Morning," Amina yawned, emerging from her room in mismatched socks and a vintage band t-shirt that had definitely come from the thrift store. She paused, taking in the scene. "You're thinking too loud again, and you're wearing my socks again." "Laundry day." Amina grabbed a bowl from the cabinet, the beads in her braids clicking. "Also, you're deflecting. What's wrong?" Sometimes Araya hated how perceptive her sister had become. "Nothing's wrong, just work stuff." "Uh-huh." Amina poured cereal with dramatic skepticism. "That's why you're staring at your phone like it holds the secrets of the universe." "I was not. It's Lover Boy, isn't it? Garden Man. Mr. Tall, dark and brooding. His name is Elio and we're not." Araya stopped, realizing she was stammering like a teenager. "Eat your cereal." Amina's grin was insufferable. "You know, for someone who practically raised me, you're really bad at lying." Before Araya could respond, her phone buzzed again. "Coffee's ready whenever you are. Made it your way. Only burned myself twice." "Oh my God." Amina leaned over, reading the text upside down. "He's learning to make coffee for you. That's like peak romance novel material right there. It's just coffee." But even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. Right. Just like it was just gardening. Just like it was just dinner last week. Just like, "Don't you have a chemistry test to study for?" "Already did, while you were busy not flirting with Garden Man yesterday." Amina's expression softened. "He's good for you, you know. Makes you smile more." The simple observation hit harder than it should have. When was the last time anyone had noticed whether she smiled? "It's complicated," Araya said finally. "Only because you're making it complicated." Amina stood, rinsing her bowl with the efficiency of someone who'd grown up knowing every drop on the water bill counted. Life's hard enough without pushing away good things when they happen. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the same time you got so stubborn." Amina kissed her cheek, grabbing her backpack. "I'm staying late for study group again. Mex Rodriguez is supervising. Be home by 7, I know." At the door, Amina paused. "You should go see him. Before work. You look like you need something good today." The door clicked shut before Araya could argue. She sat in the quiet kitchen, looking at her phone, at the letter peeking from her bag, at the pile of bills held down by a coffee mug. Her fingers moved before her brain could stop them. "Coffee sounds good, but only if you didn't sacrifice any fingers making it." His response was immediate. All digits accounted for. Mostly. 20 minutes later, she pulled into his driveway, telling herself this was just about coffee, just about checking the roses, just about... Elio opened the door before she could knock. He looked like he'd been up for hours, or maybe hadn't slept. Hair messy, beard slightly unkempt, wearing a soft grey sweater with pushed-up sleeves that showed his garden scratches like battle scars. "Hi," he said, voice morning rough. "Hi," she echoed, suddenly unsure why she was there. He stepped back, letting her in, and the familiar scent of coffee wrapped around her like a welcome. The kitchen was warm and bright, morning sun streaming through windows that looked out over their battlefield of a garden. "You really made coffee," she said, spotting 2 mugs on the counter. "You sound surprised." "More impressed." "You're learning." His smile was soft. "Had a good teacher." They settled into what had become their spots, her perched on a bar stool, him leaning against the counter. The silence between them felt comfortable, lived in somehow. "Want to talk about it?" he asked finally. She looked up, startled. "About what?" "Whatever's making you look like you haven't slept." His eyes were gentle. "You don't have to, but you can." The letter in her bag felt heavier. The words stuck in her throat. About social services, about not being enough, about trying so hard and still falling short. Instead, what came out was, "Do you ever feel like you're one wrong move away from losing everything? Every day?" The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. "Since the accident, it's like walking on ice. Never sure which step will crack it." Araya wrapped her hands around the warm mug, anchoring herself. "How do you handle it?" "Badly, mostly." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hide in inherited houses, fight with roses, make terrible coffee until someone shows me how to do it right. And now?" "Now." He moved closer, just slightly. Now I'm learning that maybe some battles are better fought with company. The morning light caught in his beard, turning the edges gold. This close, she could see the flecks of amber in his green eyes, the slight crook in his nose that suggested an old break, the way he held himself like he was always trying to take up less space. "I got a letter," she heard herself say, "from social services, about Amina." Elio went very still. "Bad? They want to reevaluate. They think I'm not providing enough stability." The words burned coming out. A proper family environment, whatever that means. That's bullshit. The force of his response surprised her. Elio rarely swore, rarely showed strong emotion at all. "It's protocol," she said, the excuse tasting bitter. "It's bullshit," he repeated, softer now. "Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you and Amina can see what family really means." Something cracked in Araya's chest. A wall, a defense, a carefully maintained distance. "I can't lose her." "You won't." He reached out, slowly, telegraphing the movement, and touched her hand where it gripped the coffee mug. His fingers were warm, slightly calloused from garden work. "Whatever you need. Resources, references, character, witnesses. I'm here." The simple offer, made without pity or agenda, undid her completely. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. Without a word, Elio pulled her into his arms. She should resist, should maintain boundaries, should... Instead, she let herself lean into him, just for a moment. His sweater was soft against her cheek, and his arms were strong, and he smelled like coffee and garden earth and something uniquely him. "Thank you," she whispered into his chest. His hand came up to cradle the back of her head, gentle as if she was something precious, always. They stayed like that in the morning light, as the coffee cooled and the roses plotted outside and the world kept spinning. Just two people holding each other up, learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone catch you when you fall. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The sunset painted Moonbeam Coffee's windows in shades of orange and pink, but Araya barely noticed. She was too busy watching the clock, counting down the minutes until her shift ended, trying not to think about warm arms and soft sweaters and morning light. 3 days had passed since she'd broken down in Elio's kitchen. 3 days of careful texts about roses and coffee. 3 days of pretending she couldn't still feel the ghost of his fingers in her hair. Earth to Aria? She blinked, finding her co-worker Talia watching her with raised eyebrows. "Sorry, what?" "I said your man's here." Talia nodded toward the door, her silver nose ring catching the light. "Tall, bearded, looks like he walked out of a fancy lumberjack catalogue." Araya's heart stuttered as she turned. Sure enough, Elio stood just inside the entrance, looking simultaneously out of place and exactly where he belonged. His hair was messier than usual, like he'd been running his hands through it, and his usual flannel had been replaced by a dark blue button-down that made his eyes look impossibly green. "He's not my—" "Save it," Talia interrupted, already moving toward the register. "I've seen the way you smile at your phone. Go take your break. I've got this." Before Aria could protest, Elio reached the counter. His smile was hesitant, almost shy. "Hi," he said, as if they were alone in his kitchen again. "Hi." The word came out softer than intended. "What are you doing here? Coffee emergency?" But his tone made it a question, and something in his eyes suggested this wasn't about coffee at all. Talia cleared her throat pointedly. Aria was just about to take her break. "Weren't you, Araya?" 20 minutes later, they sat at a small table in the back corner, 2 untouched cups between them. The cafe was quiet, just a few students with laptops and 1 elderly couple sharing a muffin. "You didn't have to come all this way," Araya said finally, though part of her was glad he had. "I know." Elio traced the rim of his cup with 1 finger. A new scratch marked his knuckle, probably from the roses. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. After the other morning." The care in his voice made her chest tight. "I'm fine. It was just, if you say nothing, I'm going to let the roses win next time." Despite herself, she smiled. "You say that like they aren't already winning." "True." His answering smile faded into something more serious. "But really, Aria, how are you?" She looked down at her hands, at the coffee stains on her apron, at anything but his concerned eyes. "I got another letter today. The follow-up evaluation is next week." "That soon?" They don't waste time when it comes to determining someone's fitness as a guardian. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. Elio was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, "Let me help." "Elio, not with money," he added quickly, reading her expression. "But what if you used the house for the evaluation?" Aria stared at him. "What?" "Think about it. It's spacious, in a good neighborhood. You're already there most days with the cleaning and the garden. Amina does her homework there. It would show stability, resources. I can't lie to social services. It wouldn't be lying. You do work there. Amina does study there. We could make it more official. Proper employment contract, set hours, maybe even—" he hesitated. "Maybe even the apartment above the garage. It's just sitting empty." The offer hung between them, heavy with implications. Araya's throat felt tight. "That's too much." "Is it?" His voice was gentle. "Or are you just not used to accepting help?" Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Amina. "Don't freak out, but I might have sprained my ankle at volleyball practice. In nurse's office, I'm fine but need pickup, sorry." Araya was already standing, heart racing. "I'll drive you." Elio stood too, no hesitation. "My shift." "Girl, go!" Talia called from behind the counter. "I've got it covered. Family emergency trumps coffee emergency." The word family echoed in Araya's head as she followed Elio to his car, a surprisingly modest dark blue Volvo that had definitely seen better days. He opened the passenger door for her, the gesture automatic, then carefully closed it once she was inside. As they drove, Araya tried not to notice how the car smelled like him, or how his hand rested on the gear shift just inches from her knee, or how he navigated traffic with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. "She'll be okay," he said softly, reading her worry. "I know. It's just the timing, with the evaluation coming up." "Hey." At a red light, he turned to look at her. "This isn't a mark against you. Kids get hurt, it happens. Everything feels like a mark against me lately." The light turned green, but Elio didn't move for a moment. "You're an amazing guardian, Araya. Anyone who can't see that isn't looking properly." She wanted to argue, to push back against his unwavering faith. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "This. All of it. The garden job, the house offer, driving me to get Amina." The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Finally, he said, "Because sometimes the universe gives you a second chance to be the person you should have been all along." The words settled into her chest like warm honey. "That's a lot of pressure to put on a garden job." His laugh was soft. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just the truth." They pulled into the school parking lot, but before Araya could open her door, Elio touched her wrist lightly. "Think about the offer. Please? Not for me, but for you and Amina." She looked at his hand on her wrist, at the new scratch on his knuckle, at the way he held himself like he was afraid of asking for too much. "I'll think about it," she said finally. His smile was worth the admission. Inside the nurse's office, they found Amina propped up on a cot, her ankle wrapped in an ace bandage, scrolling through her phone with the dedication of a teenager determined not to admit pain. She looked up as they entered, eyes widening slightly. "You brought Garden Man. He drove me," Araya explained, moving to examine the ankle. "What happened?" "Tried to save a ball. Floor had other plans." Amina's gaze kept darting between them. "You didn't have to leave work." "Of course I did." "Both of you?" Elio, who had been hanging back by the door, stepped forward. "I was in the neighborhood." "At the coffee shop?" Amina's grin was knowing. "That's like 20 minutes from your house." "Amina," Araya warned. "What?" "I'm just saying it's sweet. Him rushing to be your knight in shining Volvo." Despite everything, the worry, the evaluation looming, the weight of Elio's offer, Araya felt laughter bubble up in her chest. "How much pain medication did they give you?" "None. I'm just naturally this charming." Amina tried to stand, winced. "Though I wouldn't say no to some ibuprofen." Without hesitation, Elio moved to help her up, supporting her weight easily. "Car's right outside. We can stop at the pharmacy on the way." "We?" Amina's eyes lit up. "If that's okay." He looked at Araya, uncertain. She should say no, should maintain boundaries, should— "Yes," she heard herself say. "That's okay." And maybe it was the way Elio smiled, or the way Amina leaned against him like she trusted him completely, or the way the afternoon light turned everything golden and possible. But for the first time in weeks, Araya felt something like hope unfurling in her chest. Sometimes, she thought, watching them navigate the hallway together, family isn't what you're born into. It's what grows when you're not looking, like roses climbing toward the sun. The apartment above Elio's garage was nothing like Araya had imagined. She stood in the center of the open-plan space, afternoon light streaming through tall windows, trying to ignore how her heart kept stumbling over itself. The floors were warm hardwood, the kitchen small but updated, and a reading nook tucked into a bay window looked out over the garden they'd been slowly taming. "It needs work," Elio said from the doorway, misreading her silence. Paint. Probably some new fixtures. It's perfect, Amina breathed, hobbling around on her crutches. Look at all these built-in bookshelves and the window seat. It's like something from a movie. Araya watched her sister's excitement with a mixture of hope and terror. They'd come to just look at the apartment, but standing here now she could see it all too clearly. Amina doing homework in that window seat, morning coffee in the sunny kitchen, a real home that wouldn't make social services frown and take notes. The second bedroom's small, Elio continued, his voice carefully neutral, but it has good light, and there's a separate entrance so you'd have privacy. Privacy. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning, because that's what this was really about, maintaining boundaries while crossing them completely. Can I look at the bedroom? Amina asked, already moving down the hallway with surprising speed for someone with a sprained ankle. Once she was gone, Araya turned to Elio. Be honest with me, why are you really doing this? He met her gaze steadily. Would you believe me if I said it was purely selfish? The roses need constant supervision. Elio, he ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as uncertainty, because it makes sense, because you both deserve a safe place, because, he paused, choosing his words carefully, because sometimes helping someone else helps you find your way back to yourself. The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. And what happens when it gets complicated? Life is complicated. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. But some things are worth it. Before she could respond, Amina's voice called from the bedroom. Oh my God, there's a window bench in here too, and built-in drawers. Ari, come look. Araya smiled despite herself. She's already redecorating in her head. Smart kid. Elio's expression softened. The evaluation's tomorrow? 9 a.m. Her stomach clenched at the reminder. They'll want to see where we live. So show them. He gestured around the apartment. Employment contracts ready. Garden position with housing included. Everything legal. Everything documented. It feels like cheating. It feels like survival. His voice was gentle, but firm. Sometimes the system needs help seeing what's right in front of it. The sound of Amina's crutches approaching made them step apart. She appeared in the doorway, eyes bright with excitement. There's a laundry closet with actual working machines. Do you know how much money we'd save on laundromat fees? Amina, and it's closer to school, and my friend Denise lives just 3 blocks away, and— Breathe, Araya interrupted, but she was smiling. We haven't decided anything yet. Yet, Amina emphasized, shooting Elio a conspiratorial look. That means maybe. Maybe is good. Maybe we can work with. Elio's laugh was warm. Your sister's negotiation skills are impressive. You have no idea. Araya moved to help Amina, who was starting to favor her good leg. Time for elevating that ankle. I'm fine. Couch, Araya pointed. Now. The worn leather couch, left from the previous tenant, Elio had explained, was surprisingly comfortable. Amina settled in with minimal grumbling, allowing Araya to prop her ankle on a cushion. I should get ice. Araya started to rise, but Elio was already moving. Got it. Kitchens stocked. She watched him disappear down the stairs, listened to his slightly uneven footsteps, the old injury more noticeable when he was tired. He's trying really hard, you know, Amina said softly. I know. Not just with the apartment, with everything. She fiddled with the beads in her braids. I saw him looking up volleyball injuries last night. He texted to check if I needed anything. Something warm and dangerous expanded in Araya's chest. He texted you? Mm-hmm. Said if I needed help with chemistry homework, he used to teach it. Amina's eyes were too knowing. He's building bridges, Ari. Maybe we should let him. Before Araya could respond, Elio returned with an ice pack wrapped in a kitchen towel and, impossibly, 3 mugs of coffee balanced in his other hand. Sorry if it's terrible, he said, setting the mugs down. Still learning. But when Araya took a sip, it was perfect. Exactly the way she'd taught him. Exactly the way she liked it. They settled into a strange but comfortable silence. Amina with her ankle elevated, scrolling through her phone but clearly eavesdropping. Elio in an armchair that seemed too small for his frame, trying not to look hopeful. Araya perched on the couch arm, watching afternoon shadows stretch across hardwood floors that could be theirs. The social worker, she said finally. She'll want to know why you're offering this. Because it makes sense, Elio replied simply. You already work here. The apartment's empty. It's business and practicality. But his eyes said something else entirely. And when she asks about— Araya gestured vaguely between them. I'll tell her the truth. His voice was steady. That I'm lucky enough to know two incredible people who make my too-big house feel like a home again. Amina made a small sound that might have been awe, poorly disguised as a cough. It won't be easy, Araya warned. Living this close, working together. All of it. Nothing worth doing ever is. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But I'm not afraid of difficult things, not anymore. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise and possibility. Outside, the garden they'd fought together was blooming despite their amateur efforts. Inside, the apartment waited, full of maybes and what-ifs and could-bes. Araya looked at her sister, comfortable and happy on a couch that could be theirs. At Elio, patient and steady in ways she was still learning to trust. At her own hands, wrapped around a coffee mug that felt like home. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay?" Elio's voice was careful, like he was afraid to hope. "Okay," she repeated, stronger this time. "We'll try. For the evaluation. For—" She gestured at the apartment, at them, at everything that had grown between the spaces of what they didn't say. Amina's squeal of delight echoed off the high ceilings. Elio's smile could have lit up the whole room, and Araya, watching them both, felt something settle in her chest, like puzzle pieces clicking into place, like roots finding soil, like coming home to a place she hadn't known she was looking for. Sometimes, she thought, the bravest thing you can do is let yourself believe in maybe. 9 a.m. arrived with the precision of a hammer falling. Arya stood in Elio's kitchen, their kitchen now technically, watching the social worker's sedan pull into the driveway. Ms. Diana Whitfield stepped out, clipboard in hand, her grey pantsuit as crisp as her expression. "Breathe," Elio murmured from beside her. He'd dressed up for the occasion in dark slacks and a blue button-down that made him look more like the corporate lawyer he used to be than the garden-fighting hermit she'd come to know. Even his beard was neatly trimmed. "I am breathing." Harder then. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Almost. The doorbell rang with professional punctuality. Araya smoothed her black dress, borrowed from Talia, along with a confidence she didn't feel, and moved to answer it. "Miss Bennett." Diana Whitfield's handshake was firm, her smile practiced. "And this is Elio Mercer." He stepped forward, lawyer mode engaged. "Property owner and Miss Bennett's employer. Please, come in." The next hour stretched like taffy, sweet in places, sticky in others. They sat in the formal living room, sunlight streaming through tall windows, everything arranged to look both lived in and impeccable. "So," Ms. Whitfield consulted her notes, "you've recently changed residence?" "Yes." Araya's fingers twisted in her lap until Elio subtly placed a coffee mug in her hands, giving her something to hold. "The position here came with housing, the apartment above the garage. Convenient timing." The implied question hung in the air. Elio answered smoothly, "Actually, I've been trying to fill this position for months. The previous groundskeeper retired, and the property needs constant maintenance. When I saw Araya's work ethic and attention to detail, offering her the full-time position was an easy decision." Ms. Whitfield made a note. "And the living arrangement. The apartment has been part of the groundskeeper's compensation package for decades. It's included in the employment contract, along with health insurance and other benefits." More notes. "And your relationship is strictly professional." The question hit like a punch to the sternum. Araya opened her mouth, but Elio spoke first. "Ms. Whitfield," his voice was gentle but firm, "I sense you're concerned about propriety. Let me be clear, Araya is one of the most dedicated, hard-working people I've ever met. She's turned down multiple offers of assistance because her integrity matters more than convenience. The fact that she finally accepted this position speaks to its legitimacy, not its impropriety." Something in Ms. Whitfield's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "May I see the apartment?" The tour was clinical. Bedroom sizes noted, window measurements taken, safety features checked. Ms. Whitfield paid particular attention to Amina's room, with its window seat already filled with books and the desk Elio had somehow procured overnight. "And Amina? How is she adjusting?" As if on cue, the front door opened. "Ari, the nurse said I could take the brace off for a few hours and—" "Oh." Amina stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. "Hi, Ms. Whitfield." The social worker's eyebrows rose at the walking boot. "An injury?" "Volleyball," Amina explained, shifting her weight. "Tried to save a point. Floor disagreed with my strategy." "The school nurse has been monitoring it," Araya added quickly. "And her friend Denise's mom, she's a physical therapist, checked it yesterday." "I see." More notes. "And you're comfortable here, Amina, with this arrangement?" Amina's eyes found Araya's, then Elio's before answering. I have my own room with a window seat. The kitchen has actual counter space. Elio helps me with chemistry when Ari's working late, and sometimes he tries to cook and we all pretend it's edible. Her voice softened. But mostly it feels like we can breathe here. The silence that followed felt holy somehow, like a prayer hanging in morning light. Ms. Whitfield closed her notebook. I'd like to speak with Amina alone, if that's acceptable. Araya's heart stumbled, but she nodded. As she and Elio left the apartment, she heard Amina's voice, clear and strong. Ask me anything, I'll tell you the truth about all of it. They ended up in the garden, their battlefield turned sanctuary. The roses were actually blooming now, red and defiant against the morning sky. She'll be okay, Elio said softly. Amina knows who she is. That's what scares me. Araya wrapped her arms around herself. She's always been too smart, too honest. Too much like her sister? She shot him a look, but there was no teasing in his expression. Just that steady warmth that made her feel simultaneously seen and safe. What if, she started. Don't. He stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel his presence like a shield. Whatever happens, we face it together. We? Yes, we. His voice was firm. You're not alone anymore, Arya. Neither of you are. Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps made them turn. Ms. Whitfield stood in the garden doorway, Amina beside her with a barely contained smile. Miss Bennett, the social worker's voice was professionally neutral. I've completed my evaluation. Araya felt Elio move slightly closer, his arm just brushing hers, anchoring her. While the recent changes in your situation are unconventional, Ms. Whitfield continued, I have to acknowledge the improvements in stability and resources. The employment contract is solid, the living space more than adequate, and most importantly, she glanced at Amina, most importantly, I see a family unit that, while non-traditional, is clearly functioning with Amina's best interests at heart. The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. Does that mean... Araya couldn't finish the question. It means I'll be recommending continued custody, with standard follow-up visits. Ms. Whitfield's expression softened slightly. Sometimes family looks different than we expect. My job is to ensure it works, not judge its shape. Amina's squeal of joy broke the professional atmosphere. She launched herself at Araya, nearly losing her balance with the walking boot. Elio steadied them both, his hand warm on Araya's back, after Ms. Whitfield left. After the paperwork was signed and the formal masks could drop, they stood in the garden together. Amina perched on a bench, Elio and Arya on either side of her, all of them slightly dazed. So, Amina said finally, does this mean I can paint my room? Absolutely not, Arya said automatically. Actually, Elio cleared his throat, I might have already bought some paint samples. Traitor. But she was smiling, really smiling for the first time in weeks. Elio's answering grin was soft around the edges, and Amina's laughter rang out like bells in the morning air. The roses watched it all, their blooms turning toward the sun, their thorns somehow less threatening now, like they'd finally accepted that some battles are worth losing, especially when surrender feels like victory. And in the garden they'd fought together, surrounded by the family they'd built petal by petal, thorn by thorn, heart by careful heart. Something new began to grow. Arya woke to the sound of rain and quiet voices. For a moment, she was disoriented by the unfamiliar shadows on her ceiling, the softness of her new bed, the absence of traffic noise from her old apartment. Then she remembered this was home now, their home. The voices drifted up from the kitchen below, Elio and Amina, their morning ritual of attempted breakfast and chemistry review. 2 weeks had passed since the evaluation, and somehow this had become normal, waking up to the smell of coffee, improving daily, and the sound of family. The word still caught in her throat sometimes. Araya slipped on a robe, silk, a housewarming gift from Talia, and padded downstairs. She paused in the doorway, watching unseen. Amina sat at the kitchen island, chemistry textbook open, her walking boot propped on a stool. Her braids were messy from sleep, decorated with new wooden beads Elio had brought home yesterday just because. Elio stood at the stove, beard untrimmed, wearing what appeared to be a Kiss the Cook's Failed Experiments apron that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. He was gesturing with a spatula, explaining something about molecular bonds, while what looked suspiciously like burning pancakes smoked behind him. So if the electrons are shared unequally, he was saying, the bond becomes polar covalent, Amina finished, Like your relationship with basic cooking skills. Hey, I'm improving. Are you, though? Amina sniffed the air pointedly. Because something's definitely becoming a polar covalent bond with the bottom of that pan. Elio swore softly, turning to rescue the pancakes. Don't tell your sister. Don't tell me what? Araya stepped into the kitchen, fighting a smile. They both jumped, wearing matching guilty expressions that made her heart do strange things. Nothing, they said in unison, then looked at each other in betrayal. Uh-huh. Araya moved to the coffee maker, her coffee maker now, transferred from the old apartment like a treasure. And that burning smell is character development, Elio supplied, scraping something black from the pan. Also, good morning. He said it casually like he did every morning, but something in his voice made her pause. When she turned, he was watching her with that soft expression that always made her feel simultaneously seen and safe. Morning, she managed, ignoring Amina's poorly disguised smirk. We're studying polar bonds, Amina announced, and the slow death of innocent pancakes. Sounds educational. Very. Elio dumped the ruined pancakes and started fresh. We've learned that chemistry is everywhere, especially in kitchen disasters. The easy banter, the morning light, the way they moved around each other like they'd been doing this forever, it all felt too perfect, too fragile, like a dream she might wake from. Earth to Ari. Amina's voice broke through her thoughts. You're thinking too loud again. Just tired. But even as she said it, Araya knew it wasn't true. She wasn't tired. She was scared. Scared of how right this felt, how easily they'd slipped into this life, how much she had to lose now. Elio must have read something in her expression, because he moved closer, coffee pot in hand. Refill? Their fingers brushed as he poured, and that simple touch sent electricity up her arm. They'd been dancing around this, whatever this was, for weeks now, professional boundaries blurring into something else, something neither of them had names for yet. Thanks, she murmured. Always. The word hung between them, heavy with promise. Oh my God, Amina groaned. You two are worse than polar bonds. At least molecules admit when they're attracted to each other. Homework, Araya said firmly, but she could feel heat rising in her cheeks. I'm just saying, now. Amina rolled her eyes but turned back to her textbook, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like emotional covalent bonding. The morning continued in its new normal way. Elio eventually produced edible pancakes, with only minor casualties. Amina finished her chemistry review, with only minor sarcasm, and Araya pretended not to notice how domestic it all felt. But as she helped clean up, passing dishes to Elio in a rhythm they'd perfected, something shifted. Maybe it was the rain making everything feel intimate, or the way his hand lingered when she passed him a coffee mug, or how he'd started humming unconsciously, some old song that made her think of slow dances and possibilities. You're good with her, Araya said softly, nodding toward Amina, who had moved to the window seat with her phone. She makes it easy. Elio's voice was equally quiet. Smart kid, heart like a lighthouse. A lighthouse? Yeah, you know, bright, steady, helps people find their way home. The simple poetry of it caught her off guard. Is that what we're doing? Finding our way home? Elio set down the dish towel, turning to face her fully. I think maybe we're building it, piece by piece. Their eyes met, and something electric crackled in the small space between them. He was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the slight curl of his hair where it was growing too long, the way his breath caught when she swayed slightly toward him. Ari, he started, voice rough. Don't. She stepped back, heart racing. I can't. Why not? The question was gentle, but it hit like a thunderclap. Because, she gestured around the kitchen, at their life, at everything. This is already so much, so precious. What if we ruin it? What if we don't? Before she could respond, Amina's voice called out, Guys, the roses are flooding. They turned to see water pooling in the garden, the morning's rain threatening their hard-won victories. Without discussion, they moved into action, Elio grabbing rain boots, Araya reaching for jackets, both of them falling into the familiar dance of garden warfare. Stay inside, Araya told Amina. No wet walking boot. But inside. Outside, the rain fell in sheets, turning the world into watercolors. They worked in practiced synchronization, Elio clearing drainage paths, while Araya protected the more delicate blooms. You know, he called over the rain, some flowers need storms to grow stronger. She looked up, water running down her face. Is that a metaphor? Maybe. His smile was soft, despite the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending I'm not falling in love with you. The world stopped. Or maybe just her heart. Elio, you don't have to say anything. He stepped closer, rain making rivers of his eyelashes. Just know that when you're ready, when you're not scared anymore, I'll be here, growing things with you. A crack of thunder made them both jump, breaking the moment. They turned back to their task, working in a silence that felt different now, charged with possibility and promise. Later, dried and changed, they sat in the kitchen again. Darmina had fallen asleep on the window seat, chemistry forgotten. The rain continued its gentle percussion on the windows. Aria watched Elio make fresh coffee, perfectly this time, and felt something bloom in her chest. Something that felt like courage, like hope, like maybe. Hey, she said softly. He turned, eyebrows raised in question. I'm still scared, she admitted, but maybe that's okay. His smile could have lit up the whole rainy day. And outside in their battle-scarred garden, the roses lifted their faces to the storm, growing stronger in the spaces between raindrops and revelations. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, stark and official in its crisp envelope. Elio's hands shook slightly as he read it, sitting alone in his too-big house while morning light painted shadows on hardwood floors. Dear Mr. Mercer, we are pleased to inform you that the position of Senior Corporate Counsel at Lambert & Associates is available. The words blurred together. Prestigious firm, remarkable recovery, time to return, reputation intact, a second chance at his old life, handed to him like a gift he wasn't sure he wanted anymore. In Boston, 3,000 miles away. Outside, he could hear Araya singing softly in the garden, some old soul song that made his chest ache. Through the window, he watched her work, watched the sun catch in her braids, watched her pause to adjust the sprinkler system they'd finally figured out together. 5 days had passed since the rainy morning when he'd confessed his feelings. 5 days of careful dancing, of meaningful glances, of moments that felt like almost. 5 days of family breakfasts and chemistry lessons, and Amina's knowing smirks. 5 days of feeling more alive than he had in years. The letter crinkled in his hands. Before he could think better of it, he pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. Little brother. His sister's voice was warm, if surprised. 2 calls in 1 month? Are you dying? Laurel. He closed his eyes, letting her voice ground him. I need advice. Must be serious if you're admitting that. They offered me my old job back. Well, better than my old job. A pause. The one in Boston? Yeah. And you're calling me because I can't take it. The words rushed out before he could stop them. Because I have a garden that needs me and a teenager who actually laughs at my terrible jokes, and a woman I'm in love with who's finally starting to trust me and... Wait, back up. Laurel's voice sharpened with interest. A woman, the one you mentioned last time? The cleaning lady with the sister? Aria, he corrected automatically. And yes, tell me everything, now. So he did. Told her about roses and coffee lessons and social workers. About Amina's chemistry homework and morning pancake disasters. About rain and confessions, and the way Araya looked at him sometimes, like she was finally letting herself believe in something good. When he finished, Laurel was quiet for a long moment. You know, she said finally, I haven't heard you sound this alive since before the accident. I know. So what's really bothering you? Because it's not the job offer. Elio watched through the window as Amina hobbled out to join her sister, walking boot finally gone. They were laughing about something, their joy visible even from a distance. What if I'm not enough? He whispered. What if I'm just convenient? The right place at the right time? Oh, honey, Laurel's voice softened. From what you've told me, that woman doesn't do anything out of convenience. She's just as scared as you are. Of what? Of believing she deserves something real, something permanent. A pause. Like you used to be. The words hit home with uncomfortable accuracy. I don't want to pressure her. Then don't. But don't you dare run away to Boston because you're afraid of how much you want to stay. After hanging up, Elio sat in his study for a long time, watching the garden through the window, watching his family, because that's what they were now, whether he had the right to claim them or not. A knock at the door startled him. Come in. Aria entered, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She'd started doing that lately, bringing him coffee like he brought her coffee, their own kind of language. You missed garden inspection, she said, setting his mug down. The roses behaved today, suspiciously well. They're plotting something. Definitely. She perched on the edge of his desk, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something floral and warm. "You okay? You've been quiet all morning." He looked up at her, really looked at her. There was dirt on her cheek and a small scratch on her arm from the roses, and her eyes held that mixture of concern and care that made his heart stumble every time. "I got a job offer," he said finally, "in Boston." Something flickered across her face, too quick to name, before she schooled her expression. "Oh, it's a good position, prestigious firm, everything I used to want." "Used to?" He stood slowly, needing to be on equal footing for this. "Before the accident, before everything. I thought success meant corner offices and billable hours. Now? Her voice was barely a whisper. "Now I measure it in coffee cups and chemistry lessons, in garden victories and morning light, in—" He stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "In the way you smile when you think no one's looking." "Elio, I'm not taking the job." She blinked. "What?" "I'm not going anywhere." He reached up slowly enough that she could pull away and brush the dirt from her cheek. Unless you want me to." Araya caught his hand before he could lower it, holding it against her face. "Why would I want that?" "Because it would be easier, cleaner, no complicated feelings or boundaries or—" She kissed him. The world stopped spinning for a moment, narrowing down to the soft press of her lips against his, the warmth of her hand still holding his, the way she tasted like coffee and possibility. When they broke apart, her eyes were wide with surprise, like she couldn't quite believe what she'd done. She started. "Oh, thank God, finally." Amina's voice made them both jump. She stood in the doorway, grinning. "I was about to lock you two in the garden shed." "Amina!" Araya stepped back, blushing. "What?" "Someone had to do something. The sexual tension was affecting my studies. How am I supposed to focus on chemical reactions when you two are having one right in front of me?" "I think," Elio said carefully, trying not to smile, "that's our cue to discuss boundaries." "Absolutely." Amina's grin widened. "Like the boundary of my teenage brain's ability to handle watching you two pine over each other. It's been exceeded, dramatically." "Out." Araya pointed to the door. "Now." Fine. I'll be in my room, with headphones on. Very loud headphones." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving them in a silence that hummed with possibility. "So," Elio said finally. "So," Araya echoed. "That happened. It did. Any regrets?" She looked at him then, really looked at him with all the walls down. "Only that I waited so long." This time, when he kissed her, it felt like coming home, like every battle with the roses. Every morning coffee, every shared laugh had been leading to this moment. When they separated, she pressed her forehead to his. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me we'll still fight about the roses." His laugh was soft against her lips, always. Outside their garden bloomed in the morning sun, roses turning their faces toward the light like they'd known all along what was growing between the thorns. And in that moment, surrounded by the life they'd built together, they both chose love. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth every beautiful, complicated step. "You know," Amina announced, perched on the garden wall with her physics textbook forgotten beside her, "most people just have a normal housewarming party, with like casseroles and small talk. Since when are we most people?" Araya adjusted another string of lights in the growing twilight. The garden, their garden, had been transformed into something magical. Mason jars with tea lights hung from tree branches, fairy lights twined through rose bushes, and mismatched chairs gathered around tables borrowed from neighbors. 3 months had passed since the kiss, as Amina insisted on calling it with audible capital letters. 3 months of learning how to be a family in all the ways that mattered. 3 months of morning coffee and goodnight kisses, of homework help and garden battles, of building something real in the spaces between moments. "Fair point." Amina swung her legs, watching Elio struggle with a particularly stubborn strand of lights. "Though most people also don't throw parties to celebrate their roses, not trying to kill them for a whole month." "The roses deserve recognition for their restraint," Elio called over his shoulder. "Also, your physics homework isn't doing itself. I'm supervising. You're commentating." "Same thing." Araya hid her smile, watching them bicker with the easy familiarity of real family. Sometimes it still caught her off guard. How natural this felt. How right. "Hey." Elio's voice was closer now, soft and just for her. "You okay?" "You went quiet." She turned to find him watching her with that look that still made her heart skip. There was dirt on his cheek and a new scratch on his arm from where the roses had apparently reconsidered their truce, but his eyes were warm with understanding. "Just thinking," she said. reaching up to brush the dirt away. Her hand lingered on his cheek, because she could do that now. About how different everything was 3 months ago. His smile was soft as he caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Better or worse? Better. Scarier. Scarier? More to lose now. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Before he could respond, a car door slammed in the driveway. "They're here." Amina jumped down from the wall, physics forgotten. "Finally!" Talia appeared around the corner, carrying what looked like enough food to feed an army. Behind her came Denise and her mom, Amina's former physical therapist turned family friend, followed by MX, Rodriguez with homemade tamales, and even Ms. Whitfield, who had somehow transformed from stern social worker to occasional dinner guest. "The roses look less murderous," Talia observed, setting down her containers. "But I brought Band-Aids just in case." "Your faith in us is touching," Elio deadpanned. "Not faith, experience. I've heard the war stories." More guests arrived. Neighbors who'd learned to accept the sound of laughter from the once quiet house. Elio's sister Laurel, who'd flown in from Seattle, to make sure you're really as happy as you sound, little brother. And even the elderly couple from Moonbeam Coffee, who'd watched their story unfold over countless lattes. As twilight deepened into true evening, the garden glowed with warmth and light. People settled into chairs, passed plates of food, shared stories and laughter. The roses, true to their month-long promise, behaved themselves, though Araya caught a few thorny branches reaching suggestively toward unsuspecting guests. "All right, everyone." Amina stood, tapping her glass with a spoon. "Attention, please." "Oh, God," Araya muttered. "What is she doing?" Speaking as the person who had to watch these two dance around their feelings for months, Amina continued, ignoring her sister's groan. "I feel uniquely qualified to make this speech. Amina, because here's the thing about love," she spoke over the interruption, her young voice carrying surprising wisdom. "Sometimes it grows in the weird places, in garden battles and coffee lessons and chemistry homework, in the spaces between what we're afraid to want and what we're brave enough to choose." The garden fell quiet, everyone watching this teenager, who somehow understood the heart of their story. 3 months ago, we became a real family, not because of papers or permissions, but because we chose each other. Every day we keep choosing. She smiled at Aria and Elio. "Even when the roses revolt, even when the coffee burns, even when I'm being a pain about physics homework." Laughter rippled through the gathering, but Araya felt tears pricking her eyes. Elio's arm tightened around her waist. "So yes, this is technically a party to celebrate not being attacked by plants for 30 whole days," Amina concluded. "But really, it's about family. The kind you find, the kind you build, the kind you grow, thorns and all." She raised her glass. "To the gardeners who taught me that love is just another word for not giving up." "To the gardeners," everyone echoed, and Araya buried her face in Elio's shoulder to hide her tears. Later, after the plates were cleared and the fairy lights twinkled like stars, after Amina had fallen asleep on the porch swing with physics equations scattered around her, after their guests had drifted home with leftovers and warm hugs, Aria and Elio stood alone in their battlefield-turned-sanctuary. "Dance with me?" he asked softly, holding out his hand. "There's no music." "Since when do we need music?" She took his hand, letting him pull her close. They swayed together under the garden lights, surrounded by the roses that had brought them together. "I love you," she whispered into his shoulder, words that had once seemed impossible, now flowing as naturally as breathing. "Even when you burn the coffee." "I love you," he murmured back. "Even when you take the roses' side. They have better tactical skills." His laugh rumbled through his chest. "Is that why you chose me? My inferior garden warfare strategies?" "No." She pulled back to look at him, at this man who had become her home. "I chose you because you made space for us in your life, because you saw me, really saw me, when I was trying so hard to be invisible, because you taught Amina chemistry and bought her books and treated her like she mattered. She does matter." "I know, that's why I chose you." She reached up to touch his face, traced the line of his beard that was going silver at the temples. "Why I keep choosing you." He turned to kiss her palm, their gesture, their promise. "Even when I'm scared, especially then," she smiled, "because I get to be brave for both of us." Above them, the moon painted silver patterns through the trees. Around them, their garden held its breath, as if even the roses understood the sanctity of this moment. "You know," Elio said thoughtfully, "I never thanked that cockroach." "What?" "The one that started all this, in the bathroom that day." You want to thank a cockroach for making me fall into your arms? Well, when you put it like that, she kissed him then because she could, because she wanted to, because sometimes love grows best in the unexpected places, between coffee cups and rose thorns, in bathroom accidents and garden victories, in the quiet moments when two people look at each other and choose to stay. When they parted, his eyes were soft with wonder. What was that for? For making space, for staying, for building this life with us. Always, he promised, the word carrying the weight of everything they'd become. And there, in their garden under the stars, surrounded by the roses that had witnessed their story from the beginning, they danced to the music of possibility. Two people who had learned that sometimes the biggest adventures start with a cockroach, a fall, and the courage to let love grow in all its beautiful, complicated glory. Because in the end, that's what their story was about. Not just falling in love, but choosing it, growing it, tending it like a garden, thorns and all. 1 year later, the garden was different in autumn light. Araya stood at the kitchen window, watching golden leaves dance across their carefully tended paths. The roses, no longer at war but maintaining an armed truce, had been joined by other flowers, wildflowers that Amina had planted, herbs that Elio was learning to cook with, and sturdy perennials that returned each year, stubborn as love. Behind her, familiar footsteps approached. Strong arms wrapped around her waist and Elio's beard tickled her neck as he pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "Coffee's ready," he murmured. "You made it?" With all the proper respect and reverence, she turned in his arms, studying his face. The past year had softened something in him, or maybe they'd softened each other. His hair was more silver at the temples now, and laugh lines had started to replace the worry lines around his eyes. "What?" he asked, catching her scrutiny. "Just loving you." His smile still made her heart skip. "Good thing I love you back." From upstairs came the sound of music and teenage laughter. Amina and Denise were supposedly working on their college applications, but the periodic bursts of giggles suggested otherwise. "Should we check on them?" Elio asked. "Give them a minute. Senior year is hard enough without helicopter parents hovering." "Parents?" His voice caught on the word. Araya touched his face, feeling the emotion in his silence. "Yes, parents. You've earned that title about 1,000 times over." Before he could respond, footsteps thundered down the stairs. "Emergency!" Amina burst into the kitchen, Denise right behind her. "The Common App essay prompt is impossible, and I'm never getting into college, and I'll have to live in the garden with the roses forever." "Breathe," Araya and Elio said in unison, then shared a smile. "I am breathing, rapidly and with panic." Amina slumped onto a bar stool. "Why can't I just write about normal things, like how I learned chemistry through the power of garden warfare and awkward romance?" "Actually," Denise piped up, "that's not a bad angle. How my sister's love story taught me science. Colleges eat that personal narrative stuff up." Amina's eyes lit up. "Oh my God, you're right. It's perfect. I can talk about polar bonds and emotional chemistry and maybe run the final draft by us first," Araya suggested, remembering some of Amina's more colorful commentary on their relationship. "Fine, fine. But I'm keeping the part about the cockroach. That's literally your origin story." "Our origin story involves a cockroach." Denise looked delighted. "Oh, honey, sit down. Let me tell you about the day my sister literally fell for a man." As Amina launched into the now familiar tale, with what Araya suspected were several creative embellishments, Elio squeezed her hand. "Garden," he whispered. She nodded, following him outside. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and late-blooming flowers. They settled on their favorite bench, the one they'd placed strategically for optimal rose supervision. "Can you believe it's been a year?" he asked, pulling her close. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like we've always been this." "This? Us? Together? A family?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "You know, I got another job offer last week, from a firm in New York." Araya's heart stuttered before she caught his expression. And I told them I was already home." He kissed her temple. "Besides, who would protect them from the roses?" "I think you mean protect the roses from them." Semantics. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the garden they'd built together. So much had changed in a year. The apartment above the garage had become truly theirs, filled with books and memories and love. Elio had started a small legal consulting practice from home, helping local businesses and non-profits. Araya had cut back to one job, using her newly free time to start online classes in landscape design. And Amina had bloomed like their garden, turning into a young woman who understood more about love and family than most adults. "Ms. Whitfield called yesterday," Aria said softly. "Oh?" "She wants to use us as a case study for other non-traditional families, to show that sometimes the best homes aren't the ones that look perfect on paper." Elio's arms tightened around her. "What did you say?" I said yes. "Because maybe somewhere there's another scared guardian, another lonely soul, another family waiting to grow in unexpected soil." Poetic. "I learned from the best. You're the one who compares everything to gardens." "Speaking of gardens," he shifted slightly, "I've been thinking. Dangerous." "Hush." He reached into his pocket, pulling out something small. "I was going to plan some big moment, but this feels right. Here, in our battlefield-turned sanctuary." Aria's breath caught as he opened his hand, revealing a ring. It was simple, elegant, with tiny rose designs etched into the band. "Elio, marry me?" His voice was soft, certain. "Not because we need to, or because it's expected, but because I want to spend the rest of my life growing things with you, fighting roses and making coffee and helping with homework and building this beautiful, complicated life we've found." Tears blurred her vision as she looked at the ring, at this man, at their garden blooming in autumn light. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." His hands shook slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for this moment. "I knew it." Amina's voice made them both jump. She stood in the doorway, Denise beside her, both grinning widely. "I saw him talking to the jeweler last week. This is totally going in my college essay." Aria laughed through her tears as their daughter, because that's what Amina was now, in all the ways that mattered, ran to hug them both, nearly knocking them off the bench. "Does this mean I get to plan a wedding?" Amina asked, eyes bright with possibilities. "It means you get to finish your college applications," Elio corrected, but he was smiling so wide it almost hurt to look at. "Fine, but I'm definitely mentioning this in my essay. How my family grew. A story of love, science, and persistent plant life. And there, in their garden with autumn painting everything gold, surrounded by the roses that had brought them together, and the love that had kept them together, they held each other close, no longer just two people who fell by accident, but a family who chose to grow something beautiful in the spaces between thorns. Because sometimes the best stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with the promise of more chapters, more growth, more love to tend in the garden of tomorrow. Foishustam, Waiskinasta. Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Would you have the courage to let love grow in unexpected places? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time. Abandoned by her rich husband and pregnant with twins, but the doctor saved her life forever. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The pregnancy test hadn't stopped shaking in her hands, even after 30 minutes. Monroe Hale sat alone in the sterile waiting room of Baltimore Memorial Hospital, her oversized Ravens t-shirt stretched across her 20-week belly, wondering how a piece of plastic could hold so much weight. 2 pink lines, 2 babies, and 0 partners. The evening light filtering through the hospital windows cast long shadows across the empty chairs, each one a reminder of the space beside her, where Graham should have been. The same Graham who'd smiled through their wedding vows last spring, who'd talked about their future family over morning coffee, who'd left a post-it note reading, "Following my dreams," on their refrigerator 3 weeks ago. The same Graham who hadn't answered a single call since. Monroe adjusted her position on the hard plastic chair, her hand instinctively moving to cradle her growing bump. The gold earrings her mother had given her for graduation clinked softly as she shook her head, trying to clear the fog of exhaustion. 24 hours of teaching 7th grade math, and her feet felt like lead weights. But it wasn't the physical exhaustion that threatened to break her. It was the silence. "Ms. Hale?" The nurse's voice cut through her thoughts. "Dr. Thorne will see you now." Monroe gathered her worn leather bag, the one she'd splurged on during better days, and followed the nurse down the corridor. Each step echoed against the linoleum floors, a countdown to another conversation she'd have to face alone, another reminder that she was carrying twice the joy and twice the terror. The examination room was colder than she expected, or maybe it was just her nerves. The paper crinkled beneath her as she settled onto the examination table, her fingers absently tracing the pattern of her stretch marks through her shirt. The anatomy scan, the big one, the appointment, where they'd tell her if both babies were healthy. If a gentle knock interrupted her spiral. The door opened, and Dr. Lucian Thorne stepped in, his presence filling the room without overwhelming it. He moved with a quiet grace that seemed at odds with his tall frame, his blue-grey eyes scanning her chart with focused attention. "Good evening, Miss Hale," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I see we're looking at twins today." He glanced up from the chart, and something in his expression shifted when he noticed her solitude. Monroe straightened her spine, summoning the strength her mama had taught her never to lose. "That's right. Though they're taking turns using my bladder as a trampoline, so I'm pretty sure they're already here." The joke fell flat in the space between them, but Dr. Thorne's lips curved slightly. Humor in the face of discomfort. That's a valuable skill in pregnancy. He pulled up a rolling stool, maintaining a professional distance. "I understand this is your first visit with us. Would you like to tell me what brought you to change providers?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Monroe's fingers found her earrings again, twisting them as she searched for words that wouldn't crack. "My previous doctor. She was recommended by my husband, ex-husband, soon-to-be ex-husband." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I needed a fresh start." Dr. Thorne's pen paused over her chart. For a moment, the professional mask slipped, and Monroe caught a glimpse of something familiar in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or recognition, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Fresh starts are valid medical decisions too," he said quietly, returning to his notes. "Now let's meet these acrobats who've been keeping you up at night." As he prepared the ultrasound machine, Monroe noticed the way his hands moved, confident but gentle, like someone used to handling fragile things. The wedding ring was conspicuously absent from his left hand, but the pale band of skin where it once sat told its own story. The gel was cold against her skin, and Monroe sucked in a sharp breath. "Doctor." Thorne murmured an apology, his focus entirely on the screen as he moved the wand across her belly. The room filled with a rapid whooshing sound, 2 distinct heartbeats, strong and steady. "There they are," he said softly, and for the first time, his smile reached his eyes. "Baby A is right here." He pointed to the screen where a tiny hand seemed to wave. "And baby B," the wand shifted slightly, "is doing somersaults." Monroe's vision blurred as she watched her children dance on the screen. Her children. Not Graham's abandonment, not her failure, but her children. "They're okay," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. Dr. Thorne turned to face her fully, his expression softening. "They're more than okay, Miss Hale. They're perfect." The tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. "Doctor." Thorne quietly handed her a tissue, pretending to study the monitor while she collected herself. In that moment of shared silence, something shifted, like a key turning in a lock neither of them knew existed. "Thank you," Monroe managed, dabbing at her eyes. "I haven't had much perfect lately." "Perfect is overrated," Dr. Thorne replied, his voice carrying a weight that suggested personal experience. "But strong." He gestured to the screen where both babies continued their underwater ballet. "That runs in the family." As Monroe left the hospital that evening, the sun had already set, but something else had risen, a tiny spark of hope, fragile as a newborn's grip, but just as persistent. She didn't notice Dr. Thorne watching her from his office window, or the way his hand moved unconsciously to his own chest, where beneath his pristine white coat, another heart was beginning to remember how to beat. The waiting room remained empty, but the silence had changed. Sometimes that's where healing begins. The morning sickness hadn't gotten the memo about mornings. Monroe leaned against the cool tile wall of the hospital bathroom, her work blazer draped over the sink, wondering if her students' pre-algebra test papers would survive being graded through a haze of nausea. 23 weeks pregnant, and her body still hadn't decided if it was growing babies or staging a revolution. "Ms. Harrison!" she called out weakly to her classroom aide, who was hovering anxiously outside the door. "Could you please watch my class for 10 more minutes?" The teenagers' voices echoed down the hallway from her classroom, room 204, Baltimore East Middle School, where they were supposed to be solving equations, not plotting their escape. "Of course, Ms. Hale. Should I call someone?" "No, I'm fine. Just..." Another wave hit, and Monroe closed her eyes, breathing through it. The twins were particularly active today, as if competing for Olympic medals in synchronized swimming or boxing. The bathroom door creaked open and Monroe tensed, preparing her teacher voice to send any curious student back to class. But instead of teenage sneakers, she saw sensible brown leather shoes and the hem of dark blue scrubs. "Miss Hale?" That voice. Monroe's eyes snapped open to find Dr. Lucian Thorne standing in the doorway, concern etched across his features. Of all the bathrooms in all of Baltimore, she had to be throwing up in the one next to where he was giving a community health lecture. "This isn't what it looks like," Monroe managed, attempting to straighten up. Her carefully twisted hair was coming undone, small coils framing her face. "I mean, it is exactly what it looks like, but I'm fine." "Fascinating definition of fine you have there." His voice was gentle, but his eyes were scanning her professionally. "May I?" He gestured to her wrist, and Monroe nodded, too exhausted to maintain her usual walls. His fingers were cool against her pulse point, and for a moment, the only sound was the tick of his watch. "Your heart rate's elevated. When was the last time you ate?" Monroe's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a protein bar. At her raised eyebrow, he actually looked slightly embarrassed. "I keep them for my long shifts. It's not exactly a gourmet meal, but better than nothing." Monroe accepted the bar, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you. Though I hope you don't make a habit of following sick women into bathrooms." Something that might have been a smile tugged at his lips. "Only the ones who are carrying twins and skipping meals." He paused, then added more softly, "I was here giving a lecture on prenatal nutrition to senior students." Ironic, isn't it? Monroe unwrapped the bar, taking a small bite. "Let me guess. How to take care of yourself while growing humans 101. More like basic nutrition for future healthcare providers," he corrected, leaning against the doorframe, "though your title has a better ring to it." The protein bar was helping, settling her stomach enough that she could stand properly. "Well, Dr. Thorne, as a teacher, I'd say your timing is impeccable. Though your choice of classroom is questionable." This time he did smile, brief but genuine. "Sometimes the most important lessons happen outside the classroom." He hesitated, then added, "Speaking of which, I noticed you missed your follow-up appointment last week." Monroe busied herself with smoothing her shirt over her bump. "Things have been complicated. The school board cut our planning periods, and with Graham's lawyer sending papers every other day." "Graham?" Dr. Thorne's voice remained neutral, but something shifted in his posture. "My ex, soon-to-be ex." Monroe's fingers found her earrings again, a tell she couldn't seem to break. "He's decided he wants to be involved after all, just not with me." Understanding darkened Dr. Thorne's eyes. "Entire custody. He says he wants to ensure proper care and upbringing." His words, not mine. Monroe's laugh was hollow. "Funny how he remembers proper care now, after leaving me to handle 28 morning sickness episodes alone. Yes, I counted." Dr. Thorne was quiet for a moment, his hands in his pockets. 28 sounds like 28 too many to face alone. He pulled out a business card, hesitated, then turned it over and wrote something on the back. "This is my direct line, for medical emergencies." Monroe took the card, noting the neat, precise handwriting. "Is morning sickness in the faculty bathroom considered an emergency?" "It is when it's accompanied by skipped meals and missed appointments." His tone was professional again, but his eyes held something warmer. "The twins need you strong, Ms. Hale, and strength sometimes means accepting help." The bell rang, startling them both. Monroe could hear her students shuffling, gathering their things. "I should go teach the future of America." "Probably." He stepped back, giving her space. "But first, finish that protein bar. Doctor's orders." Monroe slipped the card into her blazer pocket, next to her heart. "Thank you, Dr. Thorne, for the bar and the emergency line." "Lucian," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Yes, my name is Lucian." Before Monroe could respond, he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Through the open door, she could hear him explaining something to Miss Harrison, probably assuring her that everything was fine. Monroe looked at herself in the mirror, adjusting her twist back into place. Her reflection showed the same face as always, brown eyes tired but determined, skin glowing with what her mother insisted was the famous pregnancy radiance, but felt more like perpetual overheating. But something was different. Maybe it was the protein bar settling in her stomach, or maybe it was the weight of the business card in her pocket, but she felt steadier. The second bell rang. Her students would be waiting. Monroe straightened her shoulders, channeling her mother's strength and her father's determination. One hand moved to her belly, where the twins had finally settled into a gentler dance. "All right, little ones," she whispered. "Let's go teach some algebra. And maybe," she touched the pocket with the card, "and maybe we're not as alone as we thought." Outside, the autumn sun painted Baltimore in shades of gold and promise, while inside room 204, life continued its messy, beautiful dance. And in a hospital across town, a certain doctor found himself staring at his phone, wondering if helping a patient find her strength might help him remember his own. Numbers had always made sense to Monroe. 7 times 8 would always be 56. The square root of 100 would always be 10. But sitting in her obstetrician's office on a grey Tuesday afternoon, staring at the stack of legal documents in her lap, no equation could help her make sense of Graham's demands. Full custody. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. He wants full custody of babies he hasn't even met. Her fingers crumpled the edge of the papers, where Graham's lawyer had helpfully highlighted the important parts in neon yellow. As if the word unfit needed any more emphasis, the twins shifted restlessly, responding to her agitation. 26 weeks now, and they seemed to dance to her emotions like leaves in the wind. Monroe forced herself to breathe deeply, the way her mother had taught her during piano lessons. In through the nose, out through the mouth, count to 4, find your center. A knock at the door broke her concentration. Dr. Thorne, Lucian, she reminded herself, though she hadn't used his first name aloud yet, entered with his usual quiet grace. But today, something was different. The shadows under his eyes were deeper, his normally pristine white coat slightly rumpled at the edges. "Miss Hale," he started, then paused, noticing the papers in her lap. His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "I see you've received them too." Monroe's head snapped up. "Toys too." Lucian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd never seen him make before. It made him look younger, more vulnerable. "I've been served with a subpoena. Your ex-husband's lawyer wants my testimony about your prenatal care." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Monroe gripped the armrests of her chair, her gold earrings catching the fluorescent light as she shook her head. That's impossible. Doctor-patient confidentiality can be challenged in custody cases." Lucian's voice was gentle but firm. "But Miss Hale, Monroe, I need you to know something." He pulled up his stool, sitting at eye level with her. "Everything in your file shows exemplary prenatal care. You've followed every recommendation, made every important appointment, maintained your health despite significant stress. If they want my professional opinion, they'll get it." Monroe studied his face, searching for any hint of pity. She found none. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know." He reached for her chart, but his hand hesitated over it. "And because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, but the same courtroom, the same type of lawyers who highlight words like weapons." Understanding dawned. "Your divorce?" Lucian nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. 3 years ago, my son, James. I only see him every other weekend now. His mother's lawyer painted a very convincing picture of a doctor too busy for fatherhood. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Monroe wanted to reach out, to offer some comfort, but her own hands were shaking too much to be steady. "I'm sorry," she said finally, meaning it. No one should have to fight for the right to love their own children. Something flickered in Lucian's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or remembered grief. No, they shouldn't. He straightened, professionalism settling back over him like armor. "Now, let's check on these little ones." The exam proceeded as usual, but the silence between them had changed. It was fuller now, laden with shared understanding. The twins' heartbeats filled the room, strong, steady, defiant against the world's chaos. "They're growing perfectly," Lucian noted, his voice warming as he pointed to the screen. "Baby A is sucking their thumb, and baby B appears to be doing the Macarena." Monroe laughed despite herself, watching her children dance on the grainy screen. "They get that from me. I used to teach dance classes in college." "Used to." Life happened. Bills, responsibilities. She trailed off, remembering weekend workshops and the joy of movement. Graham said it wasn't practical. Lucian's hand stilled on the ultrasound wand. "And what do you say?" The question caught her off guard. What did she say? When was the last time anyone had asked? "I say." Monroe watched her babies move, strong and free in their private ocean. "I say maybe it's time to remember who I was before anyone told me who to be." Lucian nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Now that sounds like the mother these twins deserve. After the appointment, Monroe found herself lingering in the hospital parking lot, watching the sunset paint Baltimore's skyline in shades of purple and gold. Her phone buzzed. Another email from Graham's lawyer, no doubt, but for once, she didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, she pulled up her music app and scrolled to an old playlist labeled Dance Studio Days. The first notes of a forgotten melody filled her car, and her body remembered the rhythm, the freedom, the joy. In the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of movement. Dr. Thorne was leaving for the day, his tall frame silhouetted against the hospital lights. He paused at his car, phone pressed to his ear, and even from a distance, Monroe could read the tension in his shoulders. A custody call, maybe, or just another battle in the war they both seemed to be fighting. The twins kicked in perfect synchronization, as if applauding. Monroe placed both hands on her belly, feeling their strength, their possibility. "Okay, little ones," she whispered. "Lesson number 1. Sometimes the bravest dance is the one you do alone." She paused, watching as Lucian's car pulled away. "But maybe sometimes the best dances are the ones where someone unexpected joins in." The music played on, filling her car with memories of who she used to be and whispers of who she might become. Tomorrow would bring more lawyers, more highlighted documents, more battles. But tonight, in a hospital parking lot as day faded to dusk, Monroe Hale remembered how to dance. The grocery store at 11 p.m. was its own kind of liminal space. Monroe wandered the aisles of Martinez Market, her shopping basket heavy with the random cravings that had driven her out of bed: pickles, chocolate ice cream, and, inexplicably, raw carrots. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting strange shadows in the nearly empty store. 28 weeks pregnant, and sleep had become a distant memory. Between the twins' nocturnal gymnastics and the mounting pressure of Graham's custody suit, Monroe's nights had become an endless parade of worry and watermelon cravings. Her loose Baltimore Ravens sleep shirt stretched over her growing belly as she reached for a jar of peanut butter on the top shelf. "Let me help you with that." A familiar hand reached past her, easily grabbing the jar. Monroe turned to find Lucian Thorne standing there, looking decidedly undoctor-like in faded jeans and a grey Henley. The shadows under his eyes matched her own. "We have to stop meeting like this," Monroe said, accepting the peanut butter. "People will talk. At this hour, the only people awake are the sleep-deprived and the guilty." He glanced at her basket. "Although that combination suggests a bit of both." Monroe looked down at her mismatched groceries and laughed. "Judge not, Dr. Thorne. Your cart isn't exactly a model of nutritional excellence either." She nodded toward his basket, which contained coffee, more coffee, and a single sad-looking TV dinner. "Touché." His smile was tired but genuine. "Long shift, long day. The twins have decided sleep is for the weak." She shifted her weight, trying to find a comfortable position. "You? Emergency C-section at 8, then paperwork, then more paperwork." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his tell for stress. "Then James's mother called to change this weekend's custody schedule. Again." The fluorescent lights flickered, casting strange patterns on the linoleum floor. Somewhere in the store, an old song played softly, something about midnight and chance meetings. "How old is he?" Monroe asked quietly. "James?" 7. Lucian's voice softened. "He likes dinosaurs and hates Brussels sprouts. He has my eyes, but his mother's laugh." He paused, looking down at his coffee-filled cart. "At least, I think he still hates Brussels sprouts. So it's hard to keep up with preferences when you're working from a calendar." Monroe touched her belly, feeling the twins shift. "I'm afraid of missing things," she admitted. "If Graham wins, there will be so many moments I'll never get back." "Monroe," Lucian's voice was firm but gentle. "May I show you something?" She nodded, curious. He pulled out his phone, quickly finding what he wanted, then held it out to her. The screen showed a carefully organized spreadsheet. "What am I looking at? Every moment I've had with James for the past 3 years, every park visit, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. Not because I'm obsessive, but because—" He took a deep breath. "Because when you only get pieces of your child's life, you learn to make each piece count." Monroe studied the spreadsheet, noting the detailed entries. October 12th. James lost tooth during dinosaur documentary. Kept tooth under pillow despite Mom's house being next day. Wanted Dad's tooth fairy to have a turn. He got $2 from me, 3 from his mum's tooth fairy. Lucian's smile held equal parts joy and pain. We're still competing on that front. The overhead lights hummed, a quiet soundtrack to their midnight confession. Monroe handed back the phone, her fingers brushing his briefly. "Oh, thank you," she said softly, "for showing me that. Thank you for understanding it." He glanced at her basket again. "Though I feel obligated as your doctor to point out that ice cream and pickles isn't exactly a balanced midnight meal," says the man buying enough coffee to fuel a small army. "Fair point." He hesitated, then gestured toward the store's small deli section. "They make decent sandwiches here. If you're interested in actual food," Monroe should have said no, should have remembered professional boundaries and complicated situations, but exhaustion had worn down her usual defenses, and the twins were doing something that felt suspiciously like encouraging kicks. "Only if you're willing to trade some of that coffee for my chocolate ice cream," she found herself saying. They ended up at one of the store's small tables, sharing turkey sandwiches and trading stories in the quiet hours between yesterday and tomorrow. Monroe told him about her students' latest mathematical adventures, and he shared tales from his residency days. The fluorescent light still hummed, but somehow it felt more like starlight. "Can I ask you something?" Monroe said, watching him doctor his coffee with an alarming amount of sugar. "That spreadsheet. Does it help, making order out of chaos?" Lucien was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "It helps me remember that even broken things can be beautiful. A scattered constellation is still made of stars." The twins kicked in tandem, as if applauding his poetry. Monroe pressed a hand to her side, and without thinking, reached for Lucien's hand. "Here," she said, placing his palm where the strongest kicks were. "They seem to like your voice." The moment stretched between them, delicate as spun sugar. Lucien's hand was warm against her belly, and his eyes held a mix of wonder and something deeper, something neither of them was ready to name. "Strong," he murmured, "like their mother." The store's ancient sound system crackled, switching songs. Patsy Cline's voice filled the empty aisles, singing about falling to pieces. Monroe slowly withdrew her hand, and Lucien straightened, both of them remembering who and where they were. "I should get home," Monroe said, gathering her strange assortment of groceries. "Early class tomorrow. And I have prenatal appointments at 8. Lucien stood, collecting his coffee arsenal. "Try to get some rest, Ms. Hale." "Monroe," she corrected softly. "After midnight pickle runs. I think we're on a first-name basis." His smile reached his eyes this time. "Monroe," he agreed. "Sleep well." They parted ways in the parking lot, each carrying their midnight provisions and unspoken words. Monroe watched his car disappear into the Baltimore night, then turned her face up to the stars, scattered but somehow perfect in their chaos. The twins moved again, gentler now, like they were settling in for sleep. "I know, little ones," she whispered. "I know. Sometimes the best conversations happen in the strangest places." As she drove home, the night wrapped around her like a blanket, and for the first time in weeks, the weight of Graham's legal threats felt a little lighter. Sometimes strength came in spreadsheets and shared sandwiches. Sometimes healing happened in fluorescent-lit spaces between yesterday and tomorrow. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe conspired to put two broken people in the same grocery store at exactly the right moment. The courthouse steps were slick with November rain. Monroe gripped the metal railing, her 30-week pregnant body protesting each careful step. The preliminary custody hearing loomed ahead like a storm cloud, and her sensible black flats felt anything but steady on the wet stone. "Careful," a familiar voice came from behind her, followed by the sensation of a strong hand at her elbow. "These steps are a lawsuit waiting to happen." Monroe didn't need to turn to know it was Lucien. His presence had become something her body recognized, like the way the twins always seemed to settle when he was near. "My hero," she said dryly, but accepted his support. "Though I'm pretty sure this violates about 12 different doctor-patient boundaries. I'm here as an expert witness, not your doctor." His voice was professional, but his hand remained steady at her elbow. "Besides, preventing a fall on courthouse steps falls under the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm." They reached the top of the steps, and Monroe turned to thank him, only to freeze at the sight of a familiar figure approaching through the rain. Graham Calloway stood under a sleek black umbrella, his tailored suit as immaculate as ever. He looked exactly as he had the day he'd left, polished, controlled, and completely untouchable. The only difference was the blonde woman beside him, clutching his arm and wearing an engagement ring that Monroe recognized from their joint bank account statements. "Monroe!" Graham's voice carried across the wet courtyard, smooth as aged whiskey. and twice as bitter. "You're looking healthy." Lucian's hand tightened slightly on her elbow before dropping away. Monroe straightened her spine, grateful for the simple black maternity dress her mother had helped her choose. "Graham, I see you've been busy." The blonde, Veronica something, if Monroe remembered the social media posts correctly, had the grace to look uncomfortable. Graham merely smiled, the same smile he'd used when convincing Monroe to give up her dance classes. "So that's just ensuring our children have the best possible future. I trust you received the updated custody proposal." "You mean your demand for full custody with supervised visitation for me?" Monroe's gold earrings caught the grey light as she tilted her chin up. "Yes, my lawyer found it fascinating reading." "It's for the best, Monroe. You know that." Graham's eyes flickered to Lucian, who stood silently beside her. "And who might this be?" "Dr. Lucian Thorne." Lucian's voice was cool and professional. "I'm here as an expert witness regarding Ms. Hale's prenatal care." Something sharp flashed in Graham's eyes. "Ah, yes, the devoted physician. Your reputation precedes you, Doctor, especially regarding personal involvement with patients." Monroe felt Lucian stiffen beside her. Before either man could speak, the courthouse doors opened, and her lawyer appeared. "Miss Hale, they're ready for us." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of legal terminology and thinly veiled accusations. Graham's lawyer painted a picture of an unstable single mother, while Monroe's attorney presented medical records showing exemplary prenatal care and letters from her school principal, praising her dedication. Through it all, Monroe kept her hands folded over her belly, feeling the twins move restlessly. She didn't look at Graham, didn't acknowledge his occasional sighs or whispered comments to Veronica. Instead, she focused on breathing, on staying strong for her children. When Lucian took the stand, his testimony was precise and professional. Yes, Ms. Hale had followed every medical recommendation. Yes, her pregnancy was progressing beautifully despite significant stress. No, he had no concerns about her ability to care for twins. "And would you say your relationship with Ms. Hale is strictly professional?" Graham's lawyer asked, her smile sharp as a scalpel. Lucian met Monroe's eyes briefly before answering. "I provide Ms. Hale with medical care of the highest standard. My primary concern is the health of her and her unborn children." "That's not what I asked, Doctor." "Objection?" Monroe's lawyer called. "Relevance?" The judge sustained the objection, but the damage was done. Monroe could feel Graham's satisfied smirk without looking at him. After the hearing, Monroe found herself in the courthouse bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. The judge had scheduled another hearing for next month, closer to her due date. More time, more stress, more fights over children who weren't even born yet. The door opened, and Monroe tensed, expecting Veronica or one of Graham's lawyers. Instead, she saw Lucian's reflection in the mirror. "This is the women's bathroom," she said, attempting a smile. "I know, I'm adding it to my list of professional boundaries crossed today." He held out a paper cup of water. "You should stay hydrated." Monroe accepted the water, their fingers brushing. "Thank you for everything today. Your testimony was the truth." He leaned against the sink, his usual composure cracking slightly, though I wanted to say more. "About how you sing to the twins during examinations, how you've memorized every developmental milestone, how you're already more of a parent than—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "Than Graham will ever be," Monroe finished softly. "It's okay. You can say it. It wouldn't have helped. Trust me, I learned that lesson in my own custody battle." He checked his watch. "I have to get back to the hospital." "Will you be okay?" Monroe studied her reflection. Tired eyes but steady gaze. Her mother's strength in her shoulders, her father's determination in her jaw. "I will be. The twins have a dance recital scheduled for this afternoon. Very exclusive performance, audience of one." Lucian's smile was small but warm. "Let me guess. Interpretive dance to express their feelings about legal proceedings. More like the Macarena on my bladder." She touched her belly, feeling them move. "But hey, at least they've got rhythm. Like their mother." The words were quiet, almost lost in the hum of the bathroom fan. Monroe met his eyes in the mirror. "Lucian, I know." He straightened, doctor mode settling back over him like a familiar coat. "Professional boundaries." "Right." The word tasted like copper in her mouth. "Professional boundaries." He left first, the door closing softly behind him. Monroe stayed a moment longer, watching the fluorescent lights flicker above her. The twins kicked in perfect synchronization, as if trying to tell her something important. "I know, little ones," she whispered. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to keep are the ones we're not sure we want. Outside, the November rain continued to fall on Baltimore, washing away footprints and almost moments, while inside the courthouse bathroom, Monroe Hale added another crack to her carefully constructed walls, right next to the one shaped like a doctor's gentle hands and understanding eyes. December arrived in Baltimore like a whisper, bringing soft snow and longer nights. Monroe sat in her classroom after hours, 32 weeks pregnant and surrounded by half-graded math tests, when the first contraction hit. Not labor, she knew that much from her endless research, but Braxton Hicks, her body's way of practicing for the main event. Still, it was enough to make her pause, one hand pressed against her side, while the other clutched a red pen suspended over Jenny Martinez's creative interpretation of fractions. Through the classroom windows, she could see snow beginning to fall, turning the school parking lot into a blank canvas. Her phone buzzed. Another email from Graham's lawyer. They'd been relentless since the courthouse hearing, picking apart every aspect of her life, her bank statements, her work schedule, even her grocery receipts. The latest demanded a detailed childcare plan for when she returned to teaching. The twins shifted restlessly, perhaps sensing her tension. Monroe set down her pen and began to hum softly. An old lullaby her mother used to sing, something about starlight and promises. Slowly, they settled, just as the classroom door opened. "Miss Harrison said I'd find you here." Monroe looked up to find Lucian standing in the doorway, still in his hospital scrubs with snowflakes melting in his hair. They hadn't spoken since the courthouse, their last appointment handled by his colleague, Dr. Chen. Professional boundaries. They'd both agreed, yet here he was, looking somehow both out of place and perfectly right among the student artwork and math posters. "Parent-teacher conferences," he asked, stepping inside. "Test grading." Monroe gestured to the papers scattered across her desk. "Apparently, the quadratic formula is open to creative interpretation." "Ah, yes. I remember trying to convince my algebra teacher that x2 could identify as x3 if it believed in itself." He moved closer, concern flickering across his features. "You okay? You seem like I'm having Braxton Hicks contractions while trying to decode teenage mathematical philosophy." She attempted a smile. "Oh, just another Tuesday in the life of a pregnant math teacher." Lucian pulled up one of the student chairs, looking almost comical with his long legs folded into the small space. "You should be resting," says the man who just worked a 12-hour shift. She raised an eyebrow. "Don't think I haven't noticed the schedule changes. You've been avoiding me." "Professional boundaries." "I know." Monroe winced as another practice contraction tightened across her belly. "Though I'm not sure professional boundaries include tracking down your patient at her workplace." Lucian was quiet for a moment, watching the snow fall outside. James had his winter concert tonight, piano recital. His voice was soft, almost lost in the hum of the classroom heater. "I was supposed to be there. Caroline, his mother, changed the schedule last minute." Again, understanding dawned. "So you came here instead." "I came here because sitting alone in my office thinking about another missed moment felt like drowning." He met her eyes. "And because every time I close my eyes, I see you on those courthouse steps, facing down the man who tried to break you, and I—" "And you what?" Monroe's heart was beating faster than any Braxton Hicks could explain. "And I realized that all these professional boundaries we're so carefully maintaining." He ran a hand through his snow-damp hair. "They're not protecting anyone. They're just keeping us both alone." The classroom felt suddenly too small, too warm. Monroe pushed back from her desk, needing space to think. "Lucian, we can't. Graham's lawyers are already implying—" "I know." He stood too, careful to maintain distance. "Trust me, I know exactly how this looks. The doctor falling for his patient. The divorced dad getting too close to a custody case that mirrors his own. Every ethical line blurred beyond recognition. Falling for." The words hung in the air between them, delicate as the snowflakes outside. Before he could answer, Monroe's phone buzzed again. Graham's name flashed on the screen, along with a text. "Amended custody proposal. You might want to sit down for this one." The twins kicked hard, picking up on her sudden spike of anxiety. Lucian noticed her expression change and was beside her in an instant, professional mask back in place. "What's wrong?" "Graham." She showed him the text. He's going to use this. Use us. Whatever this is. Let him try." Lucian's voice was quiet, but fierce. "Some things are worth fighting for." "My babies," Monroe whispered. "Yes." He hesitated. then added softly, "And maybe something else too." The snow fell faster outside, turning Baltimore into a snow globe of possibilities and fears. Monroe's hand found her earrings, her mother's strength, her father's courage. The twins moved again, gentler now, like they were trying to tell her something important. "I can't lose them," she said finally. "I won't. You won't." Lucian took a step back, respecting her unspoken decision. "But Monroe, you won't lose yourself either. Not this time." She looked at him then, really looked, at the tired lines around his eyes, the compassion in his gaze, the way he stood like a man used to weathering storms alone. "What about you? What will you lose?" "Nothing I haven't lost before." His smile was sad but genuine. "Except maybe the chance to tell you that watching you fight for your children, for yourself, it's made me remember what courage looks like." The classroom clock ticked steadily, counting down moments they couldn't afford to have. Outside, the world was turning white, covering Baltimore in a blanket of new beginnings and missed chances. "I should go," Lucian said finally. "Early surgeries tomorrow." Monroe nodded, not trusting her voice. He paused at the door, snow swirling in behind him. "For what it's worth," he added quietly, "some boundaries aren't meant to protect us. They're meant to test how much we're willing to risk for what matters." After he left, Monroe stood at the window, watching his figure disappear into the snowy night. The twins danced their own private ballet, perhaps protesting the sudden absence of his voice, or perhaps reminding her that some choices weren't really choices at all. They were just the heart recognizing its own rhythm in another's silence. She turned back to her desk, to the pile of tests waiting to be graded. Jenny Martinez's creative fractions stared up at her, and suddenly Monroe understood what the girl had been trying to say. Sometimes the whole was greater than the sum of its parts. Sometimes the equation didn't need solving. It just needed courage to be written. The snow continued to fall, erasing footprints and boundaries alike, while inside room 204, Monroe Hale added another equation to life's complicated mathematics: how to measure the distance between what we want and what we dare to reach for. The emergency room lights were too bright, too harsh, making everything feel surreal. Monroe lay on her side in the hospital bed, 34 weeks pregnant and trying not to panic, as monitors beeped steadily around her. Outside her room, Baltimore Memorial Hospital hummed with its usual midnight energy, but inside, time seemed suspended. It had started during fifth period, a sharp pain different from her usual Braxton Hicks, followed by spotting that sent Miss Harrison running for the school nurse. Now, hours later, Monroe watched the fetal monitor's steady rhythms, each beep a reminder that the twins were okay, for now. "Preterm labor," Dr. Chen had said, her kind face serious. "We need to stop it. I've paged Dr. Thorne. He knows your case best." Monroe hadn't argued, couldn't argue, not when her baby's safety was at stake, not when every instinct screamed for the one person who could make this less terrifying. The door opened quietly, and Lucian stepped in. He looked like he'd been running, tie askew, hair mussed, eyes intense with concern. 2 weeks had passed since their conversation in her classroom, 2 weeks of careful distance and professional courtesy. But now, "I came as soon as I got the page." He moved to check her monitors, his doctor's mask firmly in place, but his hands trembled slightly as he reviewed her chart. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." Monroe tried to smile, but it felt wobbly. "Though your twins are apparently as dramatic as their mother." "Our twins tend to have excellent timing." The words slipped out before he could catch them, an echo of their easy banter from better days. He cleared his throat. "The medication seems to be working. Contractions are spacing out." Monroe nodded, then winced as another pain wrapped around her middle. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. He took it immediately, professional boundaries forgotten. "Breathe through it," he murmured. "That's it. Just like that." When the contraction passed, neither of them let go. The monitors beeped steadily in the background, counting heartbeats and moments and things left unsaid. "I was so scared," Monroe whispered finally. "All I could think was, Graham doesn't even know their names, the ones I picked. He's fighting so hard for them, and he doesn't even know I want to name them after the stars." Lucian's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "Tell me." Celeste and Nova. Her free hand rested on her belly, feeling their movements. "Because they're the light in my darkness." Is that too cheesy? "It's perfect." His voice was soft, but his eyes held something fierce. "They're perfect." The moment stretched between them, delicate as spider silk. Then Monroe's phone buzzed on the bedside table. Graham's lawyer again. Reality crashed back in. I should... Lucian started to pull away, but Monroe held on. Stay, she said. Please. Not as my doctor. Just stay. He sank into the chair beside her bed, still holding her hand. Monroe, if anyone finds out... I know. She met his eyes. But I'm tired of being afraid. Of Graham. Of lawyers. Of losing everything. I'm tired of pretending that what I feel for you is just what? Just gratitude. Or hormones. Or two lonely people recognizing their own pain in each other. She took a shaky breath. Because it's more than that, isn't it? Lucian was quiet for a long moment, watching the snow fall outside her window. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. The first time I saw you in that waiting room, something in me recognized something in you. Not just the loneliness or the battle scars, but the strength, the light. He squeezed her hand. I've been fighting it ever since. Why? Because I'm terrified of failing another family, of not being enough. Again, the confession hung in the air between them. James, I missed so much. First steps, first words. Now I get photos of moments I should have been there for. Lucian. Monroe tugged his hand until he looked at her. You're not failing anyone. You're fighting like me. The twins kicked then, strong and sure, making the monitors jump. Lucian laughed softly, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. Celeste and Nova seemed to agree. They're smart girls. Monroe smiled, then sobered. Graham's lawyers will use this against me. Say I'm unstable, making poor choices. Let them try. Lucian's jaw set in a determined line. Some choices aren't poor, they're just brave. A nurse appeared in the doorway, then hesitated, seeing their joined hands. Lucian didn't let go. Instead, he stood, using his body to shield their connection from view. Try to rest, he said softly. I'll be here. Not as your doctor. Just here. Monroe nodded, suddenly exhausted. The medication was making her drowsy, but she fought to keep her eyes open. Lucian? When this is over, when the twins are born and the custody battle is done, will you teach me to dance again? His smile was like sunrise after a storm. I thought you were the dance teacher. Maybe. She felt herself drifting, anchored only by his hand in hers. But I think some dances are better learned together. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was his whispered reply. Then we'll learn together, step by step, beat by beat, until we get it right. Through the hospital window, Baltimore glittered with winter lights, while inside room 412, two hearts found their rhythm in the space between professional and personal, between fear and courage, between what was safe and what was true. And in Monroe's dreams, she danced, not alone, not anymore, while two stars named Celeste and Nova twirled above, lighting the way home. The conference room at Monroe's lawyer's office felt too small for the storm that was brewing. At 36 weeks pregnant, Monroe sat with her back straight despite her exhaustion, one hand resting protectively over Celeste and Nova, while the other gripped a manila envelope that had arrived that morning. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Monroe leaving the hospital after her preterm labor scare, Lucian walking her to her car, their hands clasped in the emergency room. Each image time-stamped, documented, weaponized. Mrs. Calloway, Graham's lawyer began. Ms. Hale, Monroe corrected firmly, her gold earrings catching the winter sunlight. I never changed my name. Miss Hale, the lawyer continued, her smile sharp as broken glass. These photos raise serious concerns about your judgment. Engaging in a romantic relationship with your physician while pregnant with my client's children. Objection. Monroe's lawyer interrupted. This isn't a courtroom, counselor, and there's no evidence of any improper relationship. Graham leaned forward, his expensive suit crinkling slightly. No evidence. She's holding his hand in half these photos. The same doctor who's supposed to be providing expert testimony about her fitness as a mother. Monroe felt the twins shift restlessly, responding to her tension. She thought of Lucian, probably in surgery now, unaware that their careful dance had been captured and twisted into something ugly. She thought of his gentle hands, his quiet strength, the way he'd stayed with her that night in the hospital. Professional boundaries finally crumbling under the weight of something stronger. Let me be clear, Graham continued, his voice smooth as poison. Either Dr. Thorne withdraws as a witness and removes himself from your care immediately, or these photos will be presented at next week's custody hearing, along with documentation of every time he's visited your classroom, every late-night meeting at Martinez Market, You had me followed? Monroe's voice was quiet but steady. For how long? Long enough. Graham's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm protecting our children, Monroe. From poor choices, from instability, from a mother who clearly can't... Can't what? Monroe stood slowly, her hand still cradling her belly. Can't be trusted to know my own heart. Can't be trusted to recognize real care, real support. After years of your controlled version of love, she looked directly at Graham. You don't want custody because you love these girls. You want custody because you can't stand that I might find happiness without you. The room fell silent. Even Graham's lawyer stopped shuffling papers. You have 24 hours to decide, Graham said finally. Dr. Thorne's withdrawal, or these photos go to the judge. Choose wisely. After they left, Monroe's lawyer touched her arm gently. We can fight this. Character assassination isn't... I need a minute, Monroe whispered. Please. Alone in the conference room, Monroe watched Baltimore's winter sky darken with approaching snow. Her phone felt heavy in her hand as she typed out a message to Lucian. We need to talk. Graham has photos. His response came quickly. My office. 30 minutes. The hospital corridors felt longer than usual as Monroe made her way to Lucian's office. A few nurses gave her knowing looks. Apparently, hospital gossip traveled faster than Graham's private investigators. Lucian was waiting, his surgical scrubs replaced by his usual dress shirt and tie. He took one look at her face and closed the door. Show me, he said quietly. Monroe handed him the envelope, watched as he flipped through the photos, his expression growing darker with each image. He wants you to withdraw as a witness, she said. Cut all contact, or he'll use these to paint me as unstable in court. Lucian set the photos down carefully. And what do you want? What I want, Monroe laughed, but it came out more like a sob. I want to have my babies without fear. I want to teach my students without looking over my shoulder. I want... She touched her belly as the twins kicked. I want to dance again without someone telling me the music's wrong. Monroe! Lucian stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of grey in his blue eyes. Tell me what to do. If you want me to withdraw, to step away. No, the word came out fierce and certain. No more stepping away. No more hiding. She met his gaze. I spent years letting Graham decide what was best for me. Never again. The custody hearing will show exactly what these photos show. Monroe squared her shoulders. A woman who's learned to recognize real love. A mother who's choosing courage over fear. And a man who's brave enough to stay even when it's hard. Lucian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Are you sure? Once we take this stand? I'm sure. Monroe squeezed his hand. Celeste and Nova deserve to see their mother fight for joy, for truth, for the kind of love that builds up instead of tearing down. Outside, snow began to fall, thick and fast, turning Baltimore into a world of white possibility. The twins moved in perfect synchronization, as if dancing to music only they could hear. Then we fight, Lucian said softly. Together, Monroe echoed, and in that word was every dance not danced, every moment not seized, every fear finally faced. The photos lay scattered on Lucian's desk, each one a testament to something Graham had never understood. That real love didn't need to hide. That real strength sometimes looked like holding hands in emergency rooms. That real parenting meant showing your children how to be brave. Monroe touched the nearest photo, where Lucian's hand supported her elbow on the courthouse steps. Look at us, she whispered. All this time trying to maintain boundaries, and anyone with eyes could see. See what? That some loves are worth the risk. She smiled up at him, fierce and certain. That some dances can't be choreographed or controlled. They just have to be lived. Lucian's free hand came to rest beside hers on her belly, feeling Celeste and Nova's strong kicks. Then let's live it. All of it. The hard parts and the beautiful ones. Even if we stumble, his smile held all the warmth Graham's had lacked, especially then. Because that's when we'll hold on tighter. The snow fell harder, erasing the world outside his office window, while inside, two hearts beat in time with two others, creating a rhythm that no court could judge, no lawyer could twist, no fear could silence. And somewhere in the universe, two stars named Celeste and Nova twinkled a little brighter, blessing the dance that was just beginning. The courtroom clock ticked like a metronome, counting down the moments until everything changed. At 38 weeks pregnant, Monroe sat at the defendant's table, her dark blue maternity dress carefully chosen to project stability, strength, Motherhood. The twins moved restlessly, perhaps sensing the tension that filled courtroom 3B of the Baltimore County Circuit Court. Graham sat with his legal team, Veronica notably absent. He'd traded his usual power suit for something more subdued. Navy blue, conservative, the costume of a concerned father. The private investigator's photos were arranged neatly in a folder before him, each one a potential weapon. "Your Honor," Graham's lawyer began, "we'd like to call Dr. Lucian Thorne to the stand." Monroe felt rather than saw Lucian rise from his seat in the gallery. He moved with quiet dignity to the witness stand, his shoulders straight despite the weight of what was coming. He'd refused to withdraw his testimony, refused to step away. Sometimes, he'd told her last night over late-night coffee at Martinez Market, the right path is the hardest one. Dr. Thorne, Graham's lawyer, smiled like a shark scenting blood. "How long have you been Mrs. Hale's physician?" "Since her 20th week of pregnancy," Lucian answered calmly. "And when she transferred her care to Baltimore Memorial. And in that time, would you say you've developed personal feelings for your patient?" Monroe's lawyer stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Relevance goes to the witness's credibility," Graham's lawyer countered, "and to Ms. Hale's judgment regarding the welfare of the children." The judge considered, then nodded. "I'll allow it. The witness will answer." Lucian met Monroe's eyes briefly before speaking. "My feelings for Miss Hale are not relevant to my medical testimony. What is relevant is her exemplary prenatal care, her quick response to complications, and her unwavering dedication to her daughter's health." "So you deny these photos?" Graham's lawyer held up the first image. Monroe and Lucian in the emergency room, hands clasped. "Deny that you've crossed professional boundaries?" "I deny nothing." Lucian's voice was steady. "I chose to support a patient through a medical crisis, to be present for someone facing challenges I understand personally. If that makes me less credible in your eyes, so be it. But it makes me more human in my own." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Monroe touched her belly as Celeste, or maybe Nova, kicked particularly hard. Her mother, sitting in the front row, reached forward to squeeze her shoulder. "Doctor," Thornton, Graham's lawyer continued, "are you aware that developing romantic feelings for a patient violates medical ethics?" "I'm aware that ethics are complex," Lucian answered, "that sometimes doing the right thing means recognizing when rules and reality intersect. I'm also aware that I'm not the one who abandoned my children for a political career." "Objection," Graham's lawyer snapped. "Withdrawn," Lucian said calmly. "But my point stands. We're here to discuss Mrs. Hale's fitness as a mother. I've witnessed that fitness firsthand, in her dedication to prenatal care, in her preparation for twins, in her ability to balance work and health. Any personal feelings I may have developed don't change those facts." The questioning continued, each answer more measured than the last. Monroe watched as Lucian handled every attempt to discredit him with grace and honesty. No denials, no excuses, just truth. Finally, Monroe's lawyer stood for cross-examination. "Dr. Thorne, in your professional opinion, what environment would best serve these children?" Lucian straightened, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom. "Children thrive where they are loved unconditionally, where they see strength modeled, not just talked about, where they learn that life's hardest moments can lead to its most beautiful ones." He looked directly at Graham. "They need a parent who shows them how to be brave, how to be true to themselves, how to dance even when the music seems impossible to hear." The metaphor wasn't lost on Monroe. She thought of all their careful steps, their attempted boundaries, their growing recognition that some rhythms couldn't be denied. Her hands cradled her belly as the twins moved in their own private dance. "No further questions," her lawyer said quietly. As Lucian stepped down from the witness stand, a sharp pain wrapped around Monroe's middle, different from Braxton Hicks, more intense. She must have made some small sound because both lawyers stopped, turning to look at her. "Ms. Hale," the judge leaned forward. "Are you all right?" Another pain hit, and Monroe felt something warm and wet beneath her. Her mother was instantly at her side, while Lucian moved forward, doctor's instincts overriding courtroom protocol. "Her water's broken," he announced, already checking his watch for contraction timing. "We need to get her to the hospital." Graham stood, his controlled facade cracking. "Now." "But the hearing—" "Your Honor," Monroe's lawyer interrupted. "I move for a continuance." The judge nodded, already gathering her papers. "Granted, obviously." She looked at Monroe with something like amused sympathy. "It seems your daughters have their own sense of timing." "They get that from their mother," Lucian murmured, helping Monroe to her feet. The pain intensified, and Monroe gripped Lucien's arm. "I can't. The custody decision will wait," her mother said firmly. "Right now you have more important work to do." As they helped her from the courtroom, Monroe caught a glimpse of Graham's face, confused, angry, but also something else. Something that looked almost like recognition, like maybe, finally, he was seeing her clearly, not as someone to control, but as someone strong enough to choose her own path. In the courthouse hallway, between contractions, Monroe found herself laughing despite the pain. "Care to share the joke?" Lucien asked, his hand steady at her back. "Just thinking," she managed, "about all those boundaries we tried to maintain. And here we are. My water breaking in your courtroom testimony." His smile was tender as he helped her into the wheelchair a court officer had produced. "Some stories write themselves. We just have to be brave enough to live them." "Speaking of brave," Monroe gasped as another contraction hit, "I hope you're ready for this next dance. It might get messy. Together," he promised. And in that word was every step they'd taken, every boundary crossed, every truth finally spoken. As they wheeled her toward the exit, the winter sun broke through Baltimore's clouds, painting the courthouse steps in shades of gold and promise. Two stars were about to join their earthly dance, and not even Graham's lawyers could argue with that timing. Celeste and Nova were coming, ready to write their own story, to join their mother's brave dance, to prove that sometimes the most beautiful moments come just when you think all hope is lost. And in the space between one contraction and the next, Monroe found herself smiling through tears, because finally, she was exactly where she needed to be, surrounded by real love, real strength, real family. Even if it had taken two stubborn stars and one broken boundary to get her there. Time moved differently in the delivery room, measured not in minutes, but in breaths, in heartbeats, in the space between contractions. Monroe gripped the hospital bed rails, sweat darkening the loose curls around her face, as another wave of pain crashed through her. "You're doing beautifully," her mother murmured, wiping Monroe's forehead with a cool cloth. "Just like we practiced." On her other side, Lucien stood in street clothes rather than his usual doctor's attire, hospital policy firmly enforced by Dr. Chen, who'd taken over Monroe's care. He couldn't be her physician today. Instead, he was simply the man who'd chosen to dance this complicated waltz with her, who now held her hand through each contraction as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Celeste is crowning," Dr. Chen announced. "Just one more big push, Monroe." Monroe bore down, channeling every ounce of strength she had left. The room filled with the sound of her effort. Then suddenly, magnificently, a baby's cry pierced the air. "She's here," Lucien whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Monroe, she's perfect." Celeste was placed on Monroe's chest, tiny and red and absolutely beautiful. Her cries softened as Monroe touched her cheek with trembling fingers. "Hello, my little star." But there was no time to linger. Nova was ready for her entrance. The second twin arrived just 4 minutes after her sister, announcing herself with a cry even louder than Celeste's. "Definitely your daughters," Lucien said, laughing through tears as Nova was placed beside her sister. Strong voices and perfect timing. Monroe couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the sight of her daughters together at last. Celeste and Nova, named for the stars but bright enough to create their own light. Their tiny hands seemed to reach for each other, already connected by something deeper than space and time. A commotion outside the delivery room drew their attention. Through the window, Monroe caught a glimpse of Graham arguing with a nurse. He'd apparently arrived just minutes too late for the birth. Something about traffic and his lawyer's meeting running long. "Do you want me to—" Lucien started, but Monroe shook her head. "Let him wait," she said softly, watching her daughters' faces. "This moment belongs to us." Her mother squeezed her shoulder, understanding in her eyes. "I'll go talk to him. You focus on these beautiful girls." After she left, Monroe looked up at Lucien, finding in his face everything she felt, wonder, joy, and something deeper that had been growing between them since that first day in the waiting room. "They're really here," she whispered. "They really are." He perched carefully on the edge of her bed, one hand gentle on Nova's back, while the other remained twined with Monroe's. They're exactly who they're meant to be. A soft knock interrupted them. Graham stood in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. His usual polished appearance was rumpled, his eyes fixed on the twins with an expression Monroe had never seen before. "Can I—" He swallowed hard. "Can I meet them?" Monroe studied him for a moment. then nodded. "Come say hello to your daughters." Graham approached slowly, as if afraid they might disappear. "They're so small, but mighty," Monroe said. "This is Celeste." She nodded to the baby on her left. "And this is Nova." "Star names," Graham said quietly. "You always did love the night sky." He reached out, then stopped himself. "May I?" Monroe nodded again, and Graham touched Celeste's tiny hand with surprising gentleness. The baby gripped his finger, and something in his face changed, softened, cracked, transformed. "I've been—" he started, then had to clear his throat. "I've been doing this all wrong, haven't I?" "Yes," Monroe said simply. "You have." Graham straightened, but not with his usual arrogance. "My lawyer has papers drawn up. Joint custody, generous visitation, no supervision required." He met Monroe's eyes. "If you're willing to consider it." Monroe felt Lucian tense beside her, but she squeezed his hand reassuringly. "We can talk about it later. Right now." She looked down at her daughters, perfect and new and already teaching her about love. Right now, they need their mother to rest and their father to understand that some things can't be controlled with legal papers. Graham nodded, understanding finally reaching his eyes. "They need us to be better. For them." He glanced at Lucian, something like resignation crossing his face. "Sign all of us." After Graham left, promising to return during regular visiting hours, Monroe felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Lucian wiped them away with his thumb. "Happy tears?" he asked softly. "Grateful ones." She looked up at him. "For this moment, for these girls, for you, for us," he corrected, and leaned down to kiss her forehead. "All of us." The twins slept peacefully between them, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect synchronization. Outside, Baltimore's winter sun broke through the clouds, painting the hospital room in shades of gold and possibility. "You know," Lucian said, watching Celeste and Nova's fingers intertwine, "I think they've been teaching us to dance all along." "Oh," Monroe smiled, exhausted but radiant. "How so?" "Step by step, heart by heart, teaching us that sometimes the most beautiful choreography is the one you couldn't plan." He touched Nova's dark curls gently. "That love isn't about perfect timing or maintained boundaries. It's about being brave enough to try," Monroe finished. "To trust, to believe in second chances and new beginnings. And third and fourth chances," Lucian added with a soft laugh. "However many it takes to get it right." The twins stirred, perhaps dreaming of their own private galaxy where they'd waited so long to join this earthly dance. Monroe held them closer, feeling Lucian's strength beside her, her mother's love in the room, and even Graham's awakening understanding. "Welcome to the dance, my little stars," she whispered to her daughters. "It's messy and complicated and absolutely beautiful, and we're all here to dance it with you." Celeste and Nova slept on, while around them love wrote its own choreography, in heartbeats and hope, in endings and beginnings, in all the perfectly imperfect steps that had led them here, to this room, this moment, this family being born not just of blood and pain, but of courage and choice and hearts brave enough to try again. In the end, it wasn't about maintaining boundaries or following rules. It was about recognizing when love was real enough to break them all, and being brave enough to let it. 1 year later, the late autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves through Baltimore's Patterson Park. Monroe sat on a checkered picnic blanket, watching as Celeste and Nova took wobbly steps in the grass, their first birthday dresses matching the golden afternoon light. At 12 months old, the twins were already showing distinct personalities. Celeste, thoughtful and observant, holding onto her sister's hand. Nova, bold and laughing, leading their shared adventure. "They're getting faster," Lucian said, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee from their favorite cart. "Soon they'll be outrunning both of us." "Already are." Monroe accepted her cup, cream, no sugar, the way she'd taken it since those midnight grocery store meetings. Her gold earrings caught the sunlight as she leaned against his shoulder. "Though I notice you still manage to catch them before they raid your medical journals. Professional hazard." He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her closer. "Can't have them learning anatomy before ABCs." They watched as the twins discovered a pile of leaves, their delighted squeals drawing smiles from passing joggers. Monroe's mother, visiting for the birthday celebration, helped them throw handfuls of red and gold into the air. "Graham called this morning," Monroe said softly. "Wanted to confirm next weekend's visit. He's taking them to the aquarium." "With Veronica?" "No, just him." Monroe smiled slightly. And he said he wants to really see them, not just check a box on his custody agreement. The past year had been a dance of its own, learning to co-parent, to share holidays, to put the twins first. Graham had surprised them all, showing up for doctor's appointments and milestone moments, slowly becoming the father he'd never planned to be. Speaking of agreements, Lucian shifted, suddenly nervous. Dr. Chen mentioned the practice is expanding. They're looking for a new OB/GYN. Monroe turned to face him. Oh, I'm thinking of transferring. Different hospital, different ethics board. His eyes met hers. No more professional boundaries to navigate. You love Baltimore Memorial, Monroe said softly. Your whole career. I love you more. The words were simple, certain. You and the girls. Besides, his smile turned playful. The new hospital is closer to a certain middle school. Better for impromptu lunch dates between surgeries. Monroe's heart skipped, the way it still did when he looked at her like that. You're sure? About changing hospitals? Yes. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. About this, absolutely certain. The ring caught the autumn light, not a diamond, but two small stars, their points touching. Monroe's breath caught as Lucian shifted to one knee on their picnic blanket. I had a whole speech planned, he said, about constellations and timing and love that breaks all the rules. But looking at you now, with our girls dancing in the leaves, he took her hand. I just want to ask, will you dance with me? Every day, for the rest of our lives. Tears blurred Monroe's vision as she nodded. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The twins, as if sensing the moment, tottered over to tumble into their laps. Nova reached for the ring box while Celeste patted her mother's cheeks, catching her happy tears. Look, little stars, Monroe whispered as Lucian slipped the ring onto her finger. Daddy's asking us to dance forever. Dance, Nova declared, while Celeste clapped her tiny hands. Monroe's mother appeared with her phone, capturing the moment. Their little family tangled together on a picnic blanket, autumn leaves swirling around them like nature's confetti. Perfect in its imperfection, beautiful in its truth. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep in their cribs and Baltimore's lights twinkled like earthbound stars, Monroe and Lucian swayed together in their kitchen. No music played except the rhythm of their hearts, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant lullaby of city life. Remember when we tried so hard not to fall in love? Monroe asked, her head on his chest. So worst choreography ever, Lucian murmured into her hair. Thank God our daughters knew better. Through the kitchen window, Celeste and Nova's namesakes shone bright in the clear night sky. Below, in a small Baltimore home filled with children's toys and medical textbooks, crayon drawings and coffee mugs, two people who'd once been afraid to trust love held each other close. And they danced. Not perfectly, not according to any rules or boundaries or carefully maintained distances, but truly, deeply, with all the courage and joy their daughters had taught them to find. They danced like stars finding their orbit, like hearts finding their home, like love finally, beautifully, eternally breaking free. A message to our viewers. What would you risk for love? Would you break boundaries, face fears, dance beyond the safety of carefully drawn lines? Your participation in this channel means everything to us. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. What did Monroe and Lucian's story teach you about love, courage, and the beauty of beginning again? Remember, sometimes the bravest dance is the one that breaks all the rules. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly the dance your heart needs to learn. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.